You walk into a room full of strangers. Maybe it's a meeting, maybe it's a party, maybe you're just standing in line somewhere public. No one has heard your voice yet. No one knows your name, but they're already scanning you. Your shoes, your posture, the way your jacket fits, how your face looks when you're not thinking about it. They're not even aware they're doing it, and neither are you most of the time. But silently, unconsciously, every eye on you is classifying, sorting, assigning value. Someone glances and then looks away. Someone smirks slightly without realizing it. Someone gives you that half nod that isn't a greeting, it's a judgment. No one's saying anything, but you've already been labeled. All you did was show up. Walk into a bank in sweatpants and nobody thinks you own a company. Stand on a sidewalk in a suit and people assume you're important. You could be the smartest person in the room, but if you look tired, no one listens. First impressions aren't information. First impressions are decisions. The human brain runs on speed, not truth. It doesn't wait to gather facts. It uses shortcuts. It scans in fractions of a second body language, clothing, facial tension, cleanliness, posture, grooming, eye movement. All of it forms a quick image, safe or unsafe, important or irrelevant, confident or weak. It's an ancient function evolved for survival. In social environments, the brain needs to sort people fast. Hesitation could mean danger or wasted time. That's why the details you think don't matter, a wrinkle in your shirt, a twitch in your mouth, the way you put your hands on the table, they're actually everything. You're being measured in milliseconds, not by evil people, just by fast ones. The irony is you do the same. You see someone in public and your mind instantly forms a picture. Trust, ignore, admire, avoid. It's not personal, it's automatic. You don't mean to judge, but your brain already has. By the time you reflect, the feeling is already planted. Most people don't realize this because they think they're rational. They believe they sense who someone is. They say they trust their gut, but the gut just reacts to surface data. Clothes, symmetry, expressions, tone. And no one likes to admit that their entire social perception may be built on something as trivial as shoelaces or posture. And no one wants to admit that they themselves are being judged just as shallowly. This rule feels uncomfortable to acknowledge. That's why people don't talk about it. It sounds superficial. It feels unfair, but it happens anyway. People don't wait for your ideas. They don't wait for your story. Most never will. You get one moment, one chance, and that's the frame they'll use to see everything else. Once you understand this, you stop relying on your words to shape who you are. You realize the real message comes before you speak. It's in how you stand, how you walk, what you're wearing, and how you carry it. People are watching, and what they see becomes what they believe. They hear with their eyes. That's not justice, that's just reality. You can ignore it or you can use it. But you can't escape it. People always judge by appearances first. You're in the middle of explaining something. Maybe it's important to you, maybe it's about your job, your idea, something personal. You're trying to be clear. You're choosing your words, but as you're speaking, you notice the other person's face. They're not really processing your words. They're waiting, calculating. Their eyes are focused, but it's not on understanding, it's on when they can jump in. Then they do, and what they say next has almost nothing to do with what you just said. It's related loosely, but somehow the topic has shifted. Now it's about them, their story, their version, their memory, their opinion. And just like that, you're no longer in a conversation. You're in a parallel monologue. This doesn't happen because they're selfish. It happens because they're human. When people listen, they're not hearing you. They're scanning for how your words apply to their experience. They're checking for threat, for opportunity, for attention, for validation. Their brain is running a search. What does this say about me? Do I agree? Do I relate? Do I look smart if I respond? Do I look weak if I do? The words come in, but they bounce against the self before they settle. And you do the same even when you're trying to care, even when you're focused. You filter everything through your own lens. Someone tells you they're tired, you think of the last time you were tired. Someone tells you a fear, you think of your own version of it. You think you're connecting, but you're comparing, measuring, reflecting it back. That's why so few people actually feel heard. Most conversations are collisions of personal narratives disguised as dialogue. Two people speaking through each other, around each other, sometimes at each other, but rarely to each other. People aren't listening to understand, they're listening to respond. They're listening to protect themselves, to insert themselves, to keep the spotlight from drifting away. That's not cruelty, that's default behavior. Most never notice they're doing it. Because it doesn't feel selfish, it feels normal. And that's why real attention is so powerful. Because it's rare. Because it feels like space is finally being made, not taken. Because when someone actually listens for you instead of for themselves, it shocks the system. And when you learn to see that others are always listening for themselves, you stop taking it personally. You stop expecting to be understood by default. You learn to speak in a way that passes through their filter, not fights it. You stop assuming anyone is here to listen to you unless they have a reason. Everyone listens for themselves first. You're sitting across from someone, maybe it's an interview, maybe it's a date, maybe it's just a tense conversation, you've asked a question, they've answered, and now you wait, you don't nod, you don't jump to the next question, you don't say or cool or got it. You just stay still, just a few extra seconds, and in that space something happens. They glance down, then back at you. The silence stretches not too long but long enough to become uncomfortable, and then they speak again. But this time it's not rehearsed, it's not filtered. They start explaining, justifying, admitting, filling in gaps they hadn't planned to share, all because you didn't rescue them from the silence. Most people hate that space, the gap, the pause. They see it as something that needs to be filled, but it doesn't. It's not a void, it's a trigger. Silence creates pressure, and under pressure people reveal. You might think it's the quality of your question that matters. It's not. It's what happens after it. When you ask and then disappear, not physically but emotionally, people feel abandoned in their own thoughts, and they reach to fill the gap, not for you, for themselves, because silence makes them self-conscious, and self-conscious people talk too much. This isn't manipulation, it's observation. When you remove noise, people start producing their own. You didn't demand more, they gave it willingly, because they couldn't stand not being understood, not being in control, not being certain of what you were thinking in that moment. That's the part most people miss. They think controlling conversation comes from leading, guiding, questioning, talking. It doesn't. Control comes from stillness, from being the one who doesn't rush to fill the gap, from letting them wonder what your silence means. Approval, judgment, disapproval, curiosity, they'll assume, and then they'll try to fix that assumption with more words. People talk to escape silence, but silence doesn't chase them, it mirrors them, and in that reflection they expose more than any question ever could. Most people never see this because silence is awkward, and awkward feels dangerous, so they rush, they jump in, they talk over, they interrupt themselves. They confuse constant sound with connection, but the truth is people don't open up when you speak, they open up when you stop. When you master silence, people start to tell you who they really are, not because you forced it, but because they felt the need to fill your stillness with truth. Silence makes people talk, not because they want to, but because they can't stand not to. You just have to let it happen. You're in a room where things are heating up. Tension is rising, maybe in a meeting, maybe with family, maybe in traffic with a stranger who thinks you cut him off. Words are sharper, voices are louder, emotions start spiking, and in the middle of it, you're not the one speaking the most. You're not the one flailing your hands, you're not defending, you're just still. And that stillness disturbs them more than anything you could say. People expect escalation, emotion feeds on echo. One person gets upset, the other rises to match it. That's the usual pattern, that's the trap. But when you don't rise to meet their energy, the pattern breaks. Their heat doesn't catch fire, it burns out. Staying calm doesn't mean being passive. It means being immovable. It means controlling your body, your face, your voice. It means choosing not to give them the reaction they're pushing for. Because when someone's angry, what they really want is confirmation that they've touched something real, that they matter, that you're shaken. But when you stay calm, you deny them that proof, and suddenly they're exposed. Most people don't realize this, but emotions are contagious, not through logic, but through mimicry. You shout, they shout back. You breathe slowly, they unconsciously match your rhythm. If your presence is steady, their chaos feels isolated, and isolation forces them to confront it. This isn't about being better than someone. It's about understanding the chain reaction. Every situation tilts toward the person who regulates it, not the one with the best argument, not the one with the loudest voice, but the one who creates the atmosphere others have to adapt to. People who lose their temper think they're winning because they're dominating the noise. But noise isn't control, it's exposure. The calmer you are, the more everything else becomes visible. You hear what's really being said. You see what's being avoided. You detect the bluff, the fear, the contradiction, and because you're not reacting, you're the only one who can adjust in real time. Most people don't even know this is possible. They think calm is a feeling. It's not. It's a decision. It's what you do when you're not sure what to do. It's a weapon that doesn't look like one, a mask that becomes your real face, a posture that invites confusion because if you're not matching the heat, what do you know that they do? Staying calm isn't the absence of emotion. It's the ability to hold it in your hand without letting it spill on the table. That's why the one who stays calm isn't avoiding conflict. They're running it. The one who stays calm controls the situation. You're in a conversation and someone interrupts you again, not aggressively, not violently, just enough to cut you off. You let it slide, maybe because you don't want to seem rude, maybe because you don't want to start a scene, so you smile, nod, keep going, but inside something sours, and you notice it keeps happening, again next week, again with someone else, again at home. Boundaries don't exist because you want them to. They exist only when you draw them and hold them. It doesn't have to be loud, it doesn't have to be a confrontation, but it does have to happen, a moment where you stop the flow, a moment where you signal no further, that look, that pause, that refusal to laugh at a joke that crossed the line, that calm, direct sentence that tells someone you don't talk to me like that, without anger, without emotion, just structure. And when you don't give that signal, when you keep absorbing, people assume you have no line, not because they hate you, but because you taught them that there's no cost to crossing it. That's what most people miss. They think respect comes from being nice, being accommodating, being flexible, but flexibility without limits is shapelessness, and shapeless people are easy to push. People don't respect boundaries because they agree with them. They respect them because you maintain them, even when it's awkward, especially when it's awkward. The moment you flinch, they test again, they push again, not always intentionally, sometimes just to see what you'll allow. Most people don't set boundaries because it feels uncomfortable, because they were raised to be polite, because they confuse silence with peace. But silence isn't peace if it allows erosion. Every time you let it go, it becomes harder to draw the line later. You train people, through repetition, how to treat you. That's why boundaries aren't words, they're reactions, not what you say once, but what you allow 10 times. People don't listen to declarations, they watch your thresholds. They learn your rules not by what you post, but by what you let slide. And when they know there's a line and that the line holds, their behavior changes, instantly, because most people don't want to be pushed back, they just want to know how far they can go, and when they know the edge, they stop testing, because the game ends where firmness begins. People respect boundaries, but only if you do. You ask for something once, a favor, an answer, a clarification. You're direct, calm, clear, and then silence, or delay, or avoidance. So you ask again, maybe softer, maybe with a nervous smile. Maybe you add, just wondering if you saw my last message. And something shifts, not in your words, but in how they see you. The moment you ask again, the balance of power changes. People rarely say no outright. They ignore, they stall, they act busy. It's cleaner. But what they're really doing is waiting to see what you'll do next. Will you insist? Will you retreat? Will you act like nothing happened? That second ask becomes a signal. And the signal says you need something, you're not sure of your value, you're hoping they'll validate it. And people respond to that signal, not with cruelty, with calculation. Because when you need something enough to repeat yourself, you've already given up ground. You've declared you're the one waiting, and the one who waits is always less important. That's not how it feels when you do it. It feels like you're being persistent, professional, respectful, but from the outside it looks like lowering. You're adjusting your tone, adding pleasantries, softening your edge, and each adjustment tells them you're not sure where you stand. Most people don't realize how visible this is. They think communication is about content, but it's about context, timing, tone, momentum. When you speak with certainty and stop, you create weight. When you ask again, you dissolve it. That doesn't mean you never follow up, but follow-up only works when it's rooted in control, when it doesn't sound like hope, when you're not waiting, you're reminding, and you remind once, with the same tone, the same stance. Anything beyond that becomes a negotiation, and the more you negotiate your presence, the less presence you have. People listen when they believe you can walk away, not when they sense you need them to respond. Asking once is clarity, asking twice is insecurity. And the third time isn't just weakness, it's permission for them to keep ignoring you. You don't need to be rude or aggressive, but you need to believe the first ask is enough. If you don't, neither will they. Asking twice makes you seem weak. You think they remember what you said, the exact words, the logic, the explanation. You remember crafting it carefully, going over it in your head. Maybe it was a defense, maybe it was a compliment, maybe it was just a conversation. but a week later you bring it up and they don't recall any of it, just the feeling. They remember being embarrassed, or seen, or dismissed, or understood. They remember whether their stomach tightened or their shoulders relaxed. They remember whether they felt safe or judged. Words fade fast, feelings don't. You might believe you're being reasonable, articulate, clear, but it doesn't matter. If your words made someone feel small, that's what they remember. If your silence made them feel ignored, that's what they carry. If your attention made them feel important, that's the part they replay, not your argument, not your phrasing, the impact, not the logic. This is why someone can hate you for no reason, because they don't recall what you said, only how you made them feel in the room. This is also why someone can remain loyal to you after you made a mistake, because they felt safe with you in a way they can't explain. Most people think communication is about clarity, but it's about emotion. Every word is wrapped in tone. Every tone triggers a mood. Every mood creates a memory, and that memory becomes your identity in their mind. They say, "I don't remember what she said, but I didn't like her." Or, "I forgot the details, but I remember he cared." The content is gone, the emotional trace remains. This is what most people don't realize. Trying to be right means nothing if you make someone feel wrong. Trying to win a point means nothing if you lose the person. And trying to impress someone intellectually is useless if emotionally they felt ignored. Even when you're careful, even when your words are perfect, what they hear is filtered through their state. Were they anxious, insecure, defensive? Then even kindness can feel threatening. Even logic can feel like attack. And they won't remember you were correct, they'll remember they felt small. But if someone feels seen, if they felt calmer when you spoke, more sure of themselves, more clear, then even your mistakes are forgiven. Because emotion trumps memory, every time. What you said won't survive the hour. What you made them feel lasts years. People only remember how you made them feel. You walk into a room with a strong point. You've thought it through, the facts are clean, the reasoning is sound, but when you speak, there's a crack in your voice. A little pause, a tiny disclaimer before your sentence, and the response isn't what you expected. People look doubtful. Someone challenges you casually, someone else shrugs, and even though your argument is solid, it doesn't land. Because logic isn't what they're reading you. Confidence is what people actually listen to. The posture, the rhythm, the absence of apology in your tone, the way you don't rush your sentences, the way your eyes stay level. It tells them, this person isn't seeking permission. This person isn't begging to be believed. They already believe themselves, and that belief is contagious. You've seen it before. Someone says something that makes no sense, but they say it like a fact. No hesitation, no qualifiers, and everyone nods, not because it was convincing, but because it was delivered like truth. This is how minds get swayed, not through the details, but through the certainty, because most people don't process arguments logically, they process emotionally. They absorb tone, body language, timing, they decide first and justify later. Most people aren't looking for the smartest person in the room, they're looking for the most assured, because assurance feels safe. It feels like leadership. It feels like someone has done the thinking already, and you can relax. That's why nervous accuracy loses to calm simplicity, why long explanations lose to short statements, why doubt, even when deserved, turns people away, not because they hate honesty, but because they follow conviction. And here's the part most people miss. Confidence doesn't mean being loud or dominant or arrogant. It means internal alignment. It means speaking like you've already accepted what you're saying. It means your body doesn't flinch when your words land. You can have all the facts in the world, but if your voice trembles, no one hears them. Confidence is what carries the message. Logic just decorates it. Confidence is more persuasive than logic. You're waiting for a reply, not just curious, anxious. You reread your last message, you imagine how it sounded, you start wondering if it was too much, too soon, too cold, too honest. You tell yourself you don't care, but you're checking your phone every few minutes, and somewhere in that loop, you know they're not doing the same. They're not obsessing, they're not refreshing, they're not waiting. And that's the shift, that's the power. In any relationship, professional, romantic, social, the balance tips toward the one who is less emotionally invested in the outcome. Not because they're cruel, not because they're smarter, but because they have less to lose, or at least act like it. You think being honest, open, available makes you strong, but availability is only power when it's rare, when it's freely given but not desperately offered, when your presence feels like a choice, not a plea. Most people confuse care with control. They think if they care more, try harder, show more, it will earn them closeness, respect, reciprocity, but it doesn't. It shifts the dynamic. Suddenly you're chasing, suddenly you're proving, suddenly you're hoping. And they're deciding. The less someone needs the connection, the freer they are inside it. The freer they are, the more grounded they seem, and grounded people are attractive, not just romantically, but energetically, because they're not reaching, and in a world full of reaching hands, stillness becomes magnetic. This doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop performing, you stop overinvesting in people who haven't earned that investment, you stop trying to be chosen. Because every time you care more than the situation requires, you shrink, not visibly, but emotionally, and they feel it. They feel your tension, your hope, your self-editing. And they respond by leaning back. Because they can. The person who can walk away without fear has the leverage, not because they threaten to, but because they could. And that possibility changes how the other person speaks, listens, decides. You don't win people by caring more. You win them by not needing to. The person who cares less has more power. You walk into a room and without saying a word, something shifts. People glance, they adjust. If you're stiff, they become formal. If you smile, they soften. If you're tense, they get careful. And none of it is spoken. None of it agreed upon, it just happens, like instinct. Because energy is contagious, and most people don't know they're catching it. Your tone sets the tone. Your posture sets the posture. Your mood becomes the invisible center of the interaction. If you're confident, others start to trust you before they understand why. If you're nervous, they become guarded, not because you said something wrong, but because you felt like something was off. This is how human beings operate, social creatures, pattern readers, emotional mimics. We watch, copy, reflect not because we choose to, but because that's how connection works. And the first person to walk in, the first to speak, the first to set the tempo, usually becomes the emotional lead. You've seen it before. One person panics and the room tenses. One person laughs and suddenly others feel permission to relax. You can watch it happen in groups, in meetings, in families. No words, just signals. The mistake people make is thinking their internal state is invisible, that no one notices their stress, their doubt, their awkwardness. But they do, not through direct observation, but through reaction. They feel something and their body mirrors it. Their tone matches yours. Their eyes search yours for how to behave, and they follow even when they don't mean to. This is why calm people calm rooms, why angry people start fights without lifting a finger, why anxious people make others feel unsafe even when everything's fine. It's not what you say. It's what you broadcast without trying. When you walk into a situation, your body speaks first, then your face, then your breath, then your words. And everyone else takes notes, whether they want to or not. People don't decide to mirror you. They just do. So give them something worth reflecting. People mirror your energy unconsciously. You mention plans casually. You don't brag, you just say you've got things going on. Someone asks if you're free tomorrow and you say, "Not sure yet, I have to check." No apology, no explanation, just the quiet presence of motion, of being occupied, of not always being available. And suddenly, you seem different. People lean in when they sense you're not waiting. They adjust their tone, they follow your lead. And the more you signal that your time is taken, that your attention has weight, the more others want to earn it. Because people want what others want, and if you behave like you're wanted, they assume you are. This is the paradox of attraction, not just romantic, but social, professional, everywhere. Value is rarely questioned when it's already confirmed by others. Popularity is proof, and if you carry yourself like someone with demand, people respond as if it's true, not because they're shallow, but because they're wired to seek validation in numbers. The person who appears busy, sought after in motion, becomes a prize, even if nothing changed internally, even if it's just perception. But when you behave like you're always free, always ready, always waiting, that same perception reverses. Now it looks like no one else wants your time, and if no one else wants it, why should they? This isn't about lying, it's about posture. You don't have to fake plans, you just don't offer empty space like it's disposable. You don't rush to respond. You don't rearrange your schedule at the first request. You treat your presence like a limited resource, and others start doing the same. Most people never think about this. They believe being available means being kind, being eager means being helpful. But eagerness without boundaries isn't kindness, it's devaluation. It tells people, I have nothing else going on, you're the only one, and that message, even if sincere, reduces your perceived worth. You don't need to pretend, you just need to protect your time like it matters. Because when you do, it suddenly does. If you seem in demand, you become desirable. You're in a group setting, no one knows where to sit, no one wants to be the first to speak. Then someone moves confidently, without hesitation, and just like that the others follow, not because that person had authority, but because they acted like they did. This is how humans work. Leadership isn't granted, it's taken quietly through action. You think people are looking for instructions, but most of the time they're just looking for a signal, a cue to follow. And when you provide it with motion, with certainty, with timing, they adjust to you, even if they don't say it out loud. You see this in conversations, too. One person shifts the tone from formal to relaxed, from defensive to open, and the rest follow. Not by agreement, but by instinct. People match what feels dominant, and dominance is often just decisiveness. Most people don't want to lead, not really. Leadership carries weight, risk, exposure, but they'll follow the one who seems willing to carry it, even for a moment, especially in silence. Silence is powerful because it creates space, and most people don't know how to fill it, so they wait for someone else to do it. The first person to speak shapes the room, the first to move defines the rhythm, and that rhythm becomes law. This doesn't require charisma or a title. It requires comfort with uncertainty. It requires being the one who acts before consensus. And when you do, others will hesitate and then follow, even the ones who believe they never do. They'll copy your pace, your tone, your frame of the situation, not because they admire you, but because you relieved them of the burden of decision. That's what leading is, making decisions no one else wants to make. And doing it with a stillness that doesn't ask for approval. Most people follow, and when you stop waiting for permission, they start following you. You offer help, you stay a little longer, you say yes even when you're tired, you try to be understanding, to show patience, to give people the benefit of the doubt. And at first it seems like they appreciate it, they thank you, maybe even admire you, but over time something shifts. They start expecting it. They don't ask, they assume, they interrupt you more, they become less careful with your time, less grateful. And suddenly what started as kindness feels like a trap. You're doing more, receiving less, and somehow they seem to value you less, not more. Because without strength, kindness reads as submission. Not to everyone, but to enough people that the pattern is clear. When you give without limit, without friction, without line, it doesn't always breed gratitude, it breeds entitlement. This is the part most people don't talk about. We're told kindness is a virtue, and it is, but only when it's paired with self-respect, only when it's backed by a spine, because without that people stop seeing it as choice, they see it as default, and defaults don't get thanked, they get used. The strongest kindness comes from people who can say no and choose not to, from people who could walk away but stay, from people who are not afraid of rejection, so their acceptance carries weight. But when you're afraid to disappoint, afraid to draw lines, afraid to be seen as rude, your kindness becomes a mask, not generosity but fear, and people can feel that difference. They may not say it, but they respond to it. Consciously or not, they test the limits, and if there are none, they push. Most people don't want to hurt you, but if you teach them that your time and energy are always available, they'll believe it, and they'll act like it, not because they're cruel, because you made it easy. Kindness without strength isn't kindness. It's surrender. And people exploit what surrenders. You meet someone new, they're friendly, sure, but there's no pressure, no selling, no compliments that feel too sweet, no questions that feel too personal too soon, just calm presence, interest without hunger, clarity without chase. And your guard drops. You don't even know why, but you start talking more. You open up faster. You feel safe, not because they said something magical, but because they don't seem to want anything from you. That's what creates trust. When someone needs something, your approval, your affection, your agreement, you can feel it. It leaks through their body language, through their tone, through the pacing of their words. You sense the motive. And the moment you sense motive, you adjust, you protect, you question. But when there's no need, when the person across from you is whole without you, you relax. You stop scanning for hidden asks. You stop trying to read between the lines, because suddenly there's no between, there's just presence. This is the paradox of influence. The more someone tries to gain your trust, the harder it becomes. But when someone doesn't need it, it flows freely, because you trust people who don't need to be trusted. You assume they have nothing to hide, because if they did, wouldn't they be trying harder? Wouldn't they be chasing your attention, controlling the impression, managing your perception? But they're not, they're just there, stable, unmoved by your approval or rejection, and that stillness makes them believable. Most people don't realize how visible their need is, how wanting someone to like you can ruin the chance, how trying to be trusted makes people suspicious. Because trust, like respect, can't be demanded. It's a side effect of self-containment, of emotional independence. When someone wants nothing, everything they give feels real. People trust those who need nothing from them. You explain something clearly, directly, and the other person nods kind of, but you're not sure they got it, so you say it again, maybe in different words, maybe slower, and then again just to be safe, just to make sure it landed. But each time you repeat it, you feel something shift. Their eyes wander, their tone dulls, the energy flattens. You think you're clarifying, but you're not, you're lowering yourself. Every time you restate your point without being asked, you reduce its impact. Not because what you're saying is wrong, but because confidence doesn't echo. People associate certainty with finality, one strong sentence, one clean explanation, and then stillness. When you speak and stop, it forces them to process, to react. But when you keep talking, rephrasing, circling, filling silence, they stop listening, not because they disagree, but because they already decided what they needed to decide and you didn't notice. The more you repeat yourself, the less you sound like someone who believes what they just said. This isn't about being rude or abrupt, it's about understanding rhythm. Communication isn't just about content, it's about timing, tension, delivery. If you break your own tension by repeating, you dilute your presence. You go from signal to background noise. Most people do this without realizing. They fear silence. They fear being misunderstood. They think more words mean more clarity, but what really lands is precision, followed by trust that it landed. If it didn't, they'll ask. And if they don't ask, repeating it won't help. It will only tell them you're unsure of your own words. Repeating yourself doesn't reinforce your message. It erodes it. Say it once and let it stand. Repeating yourself reduces your value. You're offered a choice. It could be small, where to sit, what to order, when to meet. Or it could be big, a job offer, a contract, a life decision. You pause, not because you're unsure of what you want, but because you're polite, careful, wanting to avoid friction. And in that pause, someone else speaks. They choose for you. Hesitation signals uncertainty. And in any group dynamic, even between two people, uncertainty creates vacuum. Vacuums beg to be filled, and someone will fill it, usually the one who cares more about momentum than your preference. You didn't say yes, you didn't say no, you left it open, and that openness didn't buy you time, it gave away control. People don't wait forever, not because they're impatient, but because leadership abhors delay. If you hesitate to state your preference, they assume you don't have one, or worse, that you need theirs to decide. Most people don't realize how fast these dynamics form. The person who speaks first doesn't always win, but the person who speaks clearly, without hesitating, always defines the frame. They create the direction, and once direction exists, it becomes harder to reverse. You can be thoughtful, you can be measured, but if you pause too long, especially at key moments, you give off uncertainty. And uncertainty invites control, not overtly, not aggressively, but subtly. One suggestion here, one assumption there, and soon the path is built and it's not yours. People respect clarity, even when they disagree with it, but they bypass uncertainty, even when they like you. You don't need to rush, but you need to show you're willing to steer. If you don't, someone else will. If you hesitate, others will decide for you. You give someone a gift, something thoughtful, something generous. They say thank you, maybe even smile wide, but a week later it's forgotten. Not just the object, but the meaning. It's left somewhere, used carelessly, mentioned rarely, and you feel it, the lack of value. Now imagine they worked for it, sacrificed time, put in effort, faced friction. Suddenly they handle it differently, carefully, with pride, with protection. People don't value what's given. They value what cost them something. This isn't about money, it's about effort, struggle, investment. When people have to earn access to your time, your approval, your attention, they treat it like something worth having. But when it's always there, freely offered, no effort required, they assume it's worth as much as it cost, nothing. You can be kind, you can be generous, but the moment people feel entitled to your presence, they stop guarding it, because there's no story of effort behind it, no emotional receipt, just delivery. Most people confuse generosity with availability. They think giving without demand makes them more lovable, more respected. But respect isn't born from ease, it's born from perceived sacrifice, and sacrifice can't exist without boundaries. When someone feels they've earned something, they attach identity to it, they protect it, they justify it, they invest further, and they fear losing it. That fear keeps them present, alert, loyal. But when it comes easy, when there's no gate to pass through, there's nothing to hold on to, nothing to defend, because people don't defend gifts, they defend trophies, not what they were given, but what they became to get it. You don't need to be cold, you don't need to play games. But you do need to let people work for your space. Because if it costs nothing, it means nothing. People protect what they feel they've earned. You're telling your side, maybe of a mistake, maybe of a decision, maybe something simple. You want to be understood, so you keep going, you add context, you clarify tone, you mention details they didn't ask for, you explain the motive, the timeline, the emotional state behind it, and you think this will make them see the full picture. But it doesn't, it makes them suspicious. Because the more you explain, the more it feels like a cover-up. It's not that the words are wrong, it's that the volume suggests fear, fear of misunderstanding, fear of judgment, and people don't just listen to what you say, they listen to why you're still saying it. When you talk past the point of clarity, you enter the space of defense, and defense looks like guilt, not because it is, but because that's how people interpret it. They assume that if something needs that much support, it must not stand on its own. Most people over-explain because they're uncomfortable with doubt. They want to control the narrative, to erase misinterpretation, but in trying to control it, they give away the very power they're trying to keep, presence. When you state something simply, directly, and stop, it lands. It invites response. It shows you believe your words speak for themselves. That confidence earns respect, and often agreement. But when you keep talking, filling the silence, clarifying things no one questioned, you shift the focus from the message to the motive. And now they're not thinking about what you said. They're wondering why you felt the need to say so much. You don't owe full disclosure to everyone. You owe clarity. And clarity rarely needs more than once. Over-explaining makes you look guilty. You stay calm for weeks, you handle pressure well, you give others the benefit of the doubt. People start to see you as composed, stable, grounded. But then one moment something breaks, you snap. Maybe it's justified, maybe it's overdue, maybe it's mild, but it's visible. And suddenly the entire image shifts. Because people don't remember consistency. They remember moments. All the patience, the quiet strength, the control gone, at least in their perception. They replay the outburst, the eye roll, the raised voice, the shift in tone. That one moment becomes the new definition of you, not because it's fair, but because it's vivid. Respect is fragile like that. It's built over time, but recalibrated instantly. You think people notice your effort, how much you hold in, how much you let go, but they don't. They remember how you handled the last thing, especially if it was emotional, especially if it affected them. This doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but it does mean that reactions weigh more than intentions. You could have the best reasoning in the world, but if your reaction looks weak, petty, desperate, or unstable, that's what sticks. Most people aren't paying attention to your words, they're watching your nervous system. Are you calm when challenged? Are you sharp when tested? Do you control your breath, your face, your posture? If you do, they trust you more, even if they don't agree with you. But if you break even briefly, they step back, not out of cruelty, but out of caution. Because a person who can't manage their own emotional state is unpredictable, and unpredictable people aren't respected. They're tolerated, avoided, or dismissed. You don't need to hide emotion, but you need to own it. You need to look like you chose your reaction, not like it chose you. Because the last one is what they remember. You're only as respected as your last reaction. In a group discussion, everyone's speaking. Ideas are flying, voices rising, opinions stacking on top of one another. You're quiet, not absent, just still. You listen, you observe, you wait. And as others start repeating themselves, over-explaining, scrambling for points, you finally speak. One sentence, two, and then silence again. And the room shifts. Not because what you said was brilliant, but because you waited, because you didn't flood the air, because your words had weight simply by being few. People associate restraint with mastery. When someone speaks less, we assume they're calculating, that they know more than they're saying, that they don't need to prove anything. Silence, in this way, becomes a form of status. Talking too much, even with good ideas, reveals need, a need to be heard, to be validated, to fill space. But when someone doesn't show that need, we instinctively assign them higher ground. We trust they'll speak when it matters. This is true in arguments, too. The quieter person appears more composed, more stable, less reactive. Even if their position is weaker, their stillness gives it strength, because people trust signals, not just sentences, and silence is a powerful signal. Most people don't realize how much they give away when they talk. They explain too much, reveal insecurity, show emotional tells, fill in blanks that didn't need filling. But the one who pauses, the one who withholds, commands attention. Not because they're better, but because people line toward mystery. And in any room, the quietest voice often controls the tone. The person who talks less isn't always smarter, but they're usually treated like they are. The person who talks less is assumed to know more. You think people are loyal because they like you, because they agree with you, because you treated them well. But the truth is, people stay close to what makes them feel stable, safe, predictable. You can be charming, generous, even inspiring, but if you're inconsistent, they'll drift. They might admire you, but they won't anchor to you. Loyalty isn't built on emotion, it's built on reliability. When people know how you'll react, not perfectly, but predictably, they start to trust you. When they know your boundaries won't shift based on mood, when your presence doesn't fluctuate without reason, when your tone isn't a gamble, they feel safe. And safety is what loyalty attaches to. You've felt it yourself, someone whose behavior swings, who disappears and reappears, whose approval feels like a guessing game. No matter how much you like them, you hesitate, you hold back, because emotional whiplash doesn't invite closeness, it invites defense. People don't want perfection, they want pattern. Not excitement, dependability. This is what most miss. They think loyalty is emotional, that you have to earn it with stories, with bonding, with shared experiences. Those things help, but they're not enough. What people truly bind to is emotional clarity. They want to know who you are on Monday will be the same person you are on Thursday. They want to know your yes will still mean yes tomorrow. That when you say something matters to you, it won't be replaced the moment something else comes along. Certainty doesn't mean rigidity, it means solidity. And when people feel that in you, they return. Even when it's hard. Even when you mess up. Because your signal is strong and they know what it means. If you want loyalty, don't be lovable. Be consistent. If you want loyalty, offer certainty. You make a harmless joke. Someone takes it as an attack. You pause before answering a question and they think you're hiding something. You set a boundary and they call you cold. You walk away and they say you're punishing them. None of that is what you meant, but it doesn't matter. Because people don't see your intent. They see their own reflected in your behavior. If they're manipulative, they assume you are too. If they play games, they assume you're playing one. If they lie, they search for lies in your eyes. And if they need control, they see resistance in every pause, every breath, every silence you give them. This is projection, and it's constant. People don't respond to what you do. They respond to what they would mean if they did it. You become a mirror, and whatever they've buried, denied, or practiced, it appears on your face, even if it was never there. This is why innocent people get accused, why calm people are called cold, why honest people are treated like liars, because the one doing the judging isn't looking at you, they're looking through you. Most never realize they're doing this. It feels like instinct, like intuition, but it's just a shortcut. If I did that, here's why, so it must be their reason too. And the more unresolved their motives are, the more distorted their lens becomes. You can't control this, you can't explain your way out of it. The more you try, the more suspicious they become. Because once someone decides who you are, based on who they are, everything you do becomes evidence for that version. The best you can do is notice it. Recognize that their reaction isn't about you. It's about their habits, their fears, their history. People don't just watch you. They insert themselves into you. People project their own intent onto others. You want to be included, respected, remembered, so you try to be likable, friendly, present. You show up, you make conversation, you wait to be noticed, but nothing sticks. You're still on the edge, still not the one they call first, until one day you solve something. You fix a problem, offer a solution, make a process smoother, say something that clears the fog, and everything changes. Because people don't remember who was nicest. They remember who helped. Usefulness isn't about servitude, it's about value. When your presence makes things easier, faster, lighter, better, people feel it, and feelings become habits. They start associating you with progress, with clarity, with comfort, and when the next opportunity comes, they want that again. They invite what solves. This is how group dynamics form, not around personalities but functions. Who gets what done, who brings stability, who reduces stress. And once you're seen that way, as functional, not just friendly, you become part of the inner loop. Most people think they need to be impressive to earn status, or loud, or dominant, but all that fades when things stop working. In those moments, the one who fixes becomes the one who stays. You don't need to brag or force it, you just need to make something smoother than it was before you arrived, and the effect lingers. Even when they don't say it out loud, they feel it, and they want it back. Being useful doesn't mean doing everything, it means doing what matters. And once you do, people don't forget. Being useful gets you invited. You treat everyone equally, you split time evenly, you make sure no one feels left out, and still someone accuses you of favoritism, of being cold, of being unfair. You're shocked. You tried your best to be balanced, and that's the problem. Fairness isn't what people track. Consistency is. People don't measure what they got. They measure what they got compared to last time, or compared to someone else, or compared to their expectation. And when that changes, even if the change is logical, they feel instability, and instability feels like injustice. If you were kind yesterday and neutral today, it feels like punishment. If you were available last week and busy now, it feels like rejection. If you complimented one person but said nothing to the next, it feels like bias, even when it's not. Because people don't experience fairness rationally. They experience rhythm. This is why leaders get accused of playing favorites even when they don't, why friends drift even when nothing went wrong, because the emotional contract wasn't about equality, it was about pattern, and when the pattern broke, so did the trust. Most people won't tell you this. They'll say you changed, you became distant, you're not the same, but what they mean is, you broke the formula I was using to feel safe. Consistency, not fairness, is the anchor people cling to. It doesn't have to be perfect, just predictable. When people know what to expect, they adapt. When they don't, they react. People don't notice what's fair. They notice what shifted. People don't notice what's fair, only what's consistent. You walk into a room and do exactly what they expect. Same greeting, same tone, same rhythm. People smile, but they're not alert because they've seen it before. They've mapped you out, and once someone can predict you, they stop paying attention. But then one day, you don't follow the pattern. You speak later than usual, or earlier. You don't reply right away. You don't laugh where they expect. You change tone, change tempo. Suddenly, they're watching again, calculating, adjusting, because you're no longer a script, you're a variable. And variables have power. Predictability is comfort for others. It gives them control over how to feel around you. But when you stay unpredictable, not erratic, not chaotic, just unpatterned, they lose the ability to stay on autopilot. They have to think again, watch closer, reevaluate. That's where your leverage begins. This doesn't mean you become distant. It means you stop broadcasting every move. You stop making yourself obvious. You let silence speak longer. You let pauses linger. You answer questions with presence, not pattern. and suddenly people stop trying to manage you because they can't. Most people are easy to read, easy to map. You push here, they react there. But when you don't react the same way, when you aren't predictable, their confidence drops. They hesitate, they play safer, and now you're leading. Predictability breeds assumptions, and assumptions lower your value. Unpredictability breaks patterns, and breaking patterns creates gravity. When people can't predict your next move, they stop trying to dominate the board. They wait to see what you'll do. And that means you're in control. If you can stay unpredictable, you stay in control. You make a harsh decision, you end something, you say no, you shut someone out, it's cold, sharp, and they call you cruel, distant, maybe worse. But a month later, they still respect you, still talk about you with edge but with clarity. You stood your ground. Now imagine you hesitate, apologize too much, bend, over-explain, try to make everyone happy. You're warm, gentle, patient, and yet somehow they treat you with less weight, less respect, maybe even less kindness. Because cruelty might sting. But weakness is what they walk over. People respond to strength even when it hurts. They resent cruelty, but they understand it. It creates edges, boundaries, structure. But weakness, softness that comes from fear feels unsafe, not emotionally, socially. Because if you can't protect yourself, how can you protect anything? This isn't fair, but it's real. People don't consciously say it. They just act on it. They test you more, push harder, talk over you, ignore your requests, smile while disregarding your needs, because on some level they sense you won't push back. Cruelty at least signals control. It may be disliked, but it's respected. Weakness, on the other hand, signals surrender, and surrender attracts pressure. Most people don't want to admit they behave this way, that they gravitate toward dominance, that they move away from softness. But it's not about morality, it's about survival. In groups, in families, in work, people look for structure. And when they don't find it, they push until they do. You don't need to be cold, but you do need to be strong. Otherwise, your kindness will become your camouflage. And your fear their path. People don't like cruelty, but they respond to it. They don't want weakness, because they don't trust it. People will forgive cruelty faster than weakness. You meet someone new and within moments they're praising you, your voice, your energy, your outfit, the way you think. It's flattering at first, but something doesn't sit right. It's too early, too much. You don't know what they're basing it on, and without realizing, you pull back. Because admiration without context doesn't feel like connection. It feels like strategy. Compliments that arrive before any effort, before any discovery, don't land as gifts, they land as tactics. You wonder what they want, why they're trying to win you over, what they're hiding. Because deep down you know, real praise requires real observation. When someone compliments you after watching, listening, noticing, it feels earned. You believe it, because it reflects something you didn't announce. It says, I was paying attention. But when it comes immediately, without any context, it feels less like appreciation and more like performance. People instinctively protect themselves from flattery that doesn't match timing. Not because they hate praise, but because they've learned to distrust charm that skips the steps. Most people think giving compliments early shows warmth, openness, generosity, but when it's not backed by any real knowledge of the person, it becomes noise, and noise isn't connection, it's pressure. Even genuine praise, if given too soon, can feel manipulative. Not because of the words, but because of the speed, because the emotional math doesn't add up. How can you admire someone you've barely met? How do you know what's rare about them if you haven't seen them in action? People feel that disconnect, even if they smile through it. You don't build trust by praising quickly. You build it by observing deeply and speaking carefully. Otherwise, your compliments become currency with no weight. And people will treat them like that. Compliments feel suspicious when they come too fast. The conversation winds down, ideas have been shared, opinions bounced around, people nod, some looking satisfied, others distracted. Then, just as it's about to close, someone adds one more sentence. Short, clear, unexpected, and it sticks. That's the voice people remember. Not because it was louder or smarter, but because it came last. Final words create final impressions. They linger longer, They become the closing note, the one that plays in the mind when the room empties. That's not psychology, that's rhythm. Humans are wired to assign weight to what ends a sequence. It feels like conclusion, like summary, like truth. And whoever owns that space owns the frame. This is why timing matters more than volume. You don't have to speak the most, you just have to speak when it counts. Let others exhaust themselves. Let the ideas cycle. Then land yours, clean, brief, decisive. You don't need to dominate the flow, just end it. Most people talk too soon, they want to be heard first. They think early entry signals authority, but in doing so they sacrifice position, because once others speak after you, your message gets buried, diluted, forgotten. But the last word, even a small one, defines the direction. It becomes the closing bracket on everything that came before. It sounds more final, more thoughtful, more true. Even if it is. You don't need to interrupt, you don't need to wait forever. But when the moment feels right, speak last. And watch the room turn toward your sentence. Because silence carries tension. And the last to fill it shapes the memory. The one who speaks last is remembered most. You send a message, you wait, nothing, you follow up, you soften your tone, you try to sound casual even though it's clear you're following. And with every word you feel it, the distance widening, the energy changing. They're pulling away, not out of cruelty, but because now they don't have to chase. You're already there. Attention changes gravity. When you give it freely, it loses weight. And when you pull it back, not with anger, but with calm absence, something shifts. They start wondering. They reread the last thing you said. They check your page. They wait longer to reply, but not because they're ignoring you, because now they feel the imbalance. This is the pull of indifference. It's not about playing games, it's about emotional posture. When someone senses that you need something from them, validation, response, approval, they hold it back, not always intentionally, but because they can, that power becomes a comfort, and comfort becomes neglect. But when you step back, when you stop chasing, when your presence becomes uncertain, the power redistributes. Now they have something to lose, something to question, and people chase what they might lose, not what's always available. You've seen it happen. The moment you stop texting, they start posting. The moment you stop asking, they start offering. They say they've just been busy, but that's not it. They felt the absence. And absence creates curiosity, and curiosity makes people move. Most don't admit this out loud. They say they want honesty, effort, directness, but emotionally they respond to space, to the lack of pressure, to the mystery of not knowing where they stand. And when you create that space, not by punishing, but by reclaiming your own attention, they come closer. Not everyone, but the ones who were lining on your pursuit. They feel it, because they needed the chase more than they realized. If you ignore someone, they chase. If you chase, they run. And once you see that, you stop reaching. Because stillness moves people faster than words. You tell someone the truth, maybe gently, maybe carefully, but it doesn't land, they flinch, they deflect, they explain, they retreat. You were trying to be real to offer clarity, but they didn't hear the words, they heard threat, disruption, change, and they shut down. Because most people aren't looking for reality. They're looking for something that feels safe. Truth rarely feels safe. It cuts, it removes illusions, it forces confrontation with things that were easier left blurry. And so, when faced with truth, even helpful truth, most people back away. Not because they're dishonest, but because their nervous system doesn't want pain. Comfort, on the other hand, is soothing. Agreement is soothing. Silence is soothing. A lie, if it's gentle enough, can feel like care. A truth, if it's raw, can feel like attack. And in that emotional math, people don't choose what's accurate. They choose what keeps the temperature down. This is why honesty alone isn't enough. Why saying, "I'm just being real," doesn't justify the result, because communication isn't just content, it's impact. And unless someone wants the truth, it hits like rejection. You've seen it, you've felt it. You told them they were wrong and they disappeared. You gave feedback and they avoided you. You tried to help and they accused you of being harsh. What they wanted wasn't accuracy, it was reassurance. Most people want to be seen, but not too clearly. They want to grow, but not uncomfortably. They want truth, but not yet. And once you understand that, you stop offering raw clarity to people who didn't ask for it. You start measuring readiness. You stop mistaking silence for consent. and you learn that timing matters more than precision. The truth is strong, but strength without invitation is violence. And most people aren't ready for what doesn't soothe them. Most people don't want the truth. They want to feel okay. They want comfort. You're in a meeting, one person dominates the room. Fast words, big gestures, constant interruptions. They seem confident for a while. But the longer they speak, the more it starts to feel like performance, like they're proving something, like they're afraid of silence. Then someone else speaks, fewer words, slower pace, no effort to impress, just presence, and the dynamic changes. People listen more closely, because the quiet one isn't trying to take space, they already have it. Real power doesn't chase attention. It assumes it. When you're secure in your position, you don't need volume, you don't need speed, you don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. Your tone stays even, your gestures minimal, your energy calm, and that calmness is the message. Because noise often masks doubt, people raise their voice when they feel unheard, they explain too much when they feel uncertain, they interrupt when they fear losing control. These signals don't create authority, they erode it. Silence, on the other hand, makes people lean in. A pause makes them wait. Stillness holds weight because it implies control, not just over the room, but over yourself, and people respect that, even when they don't realize it consciously. Most don't understand this. They think power means dominance, outshouting, outshining, but the strongest person in the room is often the one who can let others talk and still remain the center, not because of ego, but because they don't need to prove what's already obvious. You can feel it when someone with real power enters a space. They don't demand anything. The room rearranges itself around them, not because they force it, but because their presence has mass. Noise is a signal of effort. Quiet is a signal of command. And once you stop chasing attention, you start holding it. Because power isn't how loud you speak. It's how little you need to. Power is quiet. Noise reveals insecurity. You make your case, it's solid, numbers, data, facts, all clear, you walk through it slowly. You answer every objection, and still the answer is no, or worse, let me think about it. You leave confused, you did everything right. Except you aimed at the wrong part of the brain. People don't decide based on logic. They decide based on feeling, then look for reasons to support it. The moment they feel something, safety, excitement, threat, attraction, the decision is already forming. The logic comes later, not to decide but to defend, to make it seem like the choice was rational, but it was. It was emotional, always. This is why the most persuasive arguments aren't the most detailed, they're the most resonant. They create relief, or urgency, or hope. They trigger something internal, and once that happens, the conclusion is locked in. They just need a few sentences to make it look official. Most people never admit this, not even to themselves. They believe their decisions are thought out, measured, but ask them why they chose what they chose, and you'll hear feelings hiding in logic's clothing. It just felt right. It made sense at the time. Something was off. That something was emotion. Understanding this changes how you communicate. You stop stacking reasons. You start creating reactions. You lead with clarity, with energy, with empathy, not with graphs. And suddenly people listen. Not because you convinced them, but because you moved them. They won't say that out loud. They'll still talk about logic, but you'll know better. Because the body decides first. The brain just follows orders. People decide emotionally, then justify logically. And once you speak to the failing, the decision is already made. You think generosity will be recognized, that effort will be appreciated, that the more you give, the more others will see your value, so you keep showing up. You stay late, you answer quickly, you volunteer before they ask. You do things they didn't even expect, not because they demanded it, but because you thought it would help. And at first, they thank you, they nod, they smile, but then something shifts, the thanks fade, the smiles become routine. And one day, when you don't show up the same way, they look at you like something's wrong. Because what used to be generosity has become the new baseline. People don't measure what you give in absolute terms, they measure it against what you gave before. Every extra favor, every unasked effort, every unreciprocated yes becomes part of a new standard, one you never announced, but they adopted silently. You train them to expect more, not because they're ungrateful, but because consistency becomes expectation, and expectation erases gratitude. This is how overgiving becomes invisible. You think they don't see how much you're doing, but they do. They just stopped seeing it as optional. You erase the line between effort and obligation, and once it's gone, they stop seeing you as generous. They start seeing you as responsible, and responsibility isn't rewarded, it's assumed. Most people fall into this trap because they want to be helpful, they want to be liked. But the faster you raise the bar without requiring anything in return, the faster others forget you ever lifted it. You create a version of yourself that others accept as permanent, and when you try to slow down or pull back or take a breath, they don't thank you for all you did, they punish you for not doing more. You don't lose respect for giving too little. You lose it for giving too much without boundaries. Because when you give everything, the only thing left to give is more. If you give too much, they'll expect more. You don't correct them when they cut you off, you don't say anything when they're late, you brush it off when they dismiss your idea or make a joke at your expense. You tell yourself it's not a big deal, you don't want to seem sensitive, you don't want to cause tension, so you stay quiet, you let it pass, again and again and again. Until it becomes normal. Not just for you, for them. Because every time you let something slide, you're sending a signal, you're teaching them, not directly, not explicitly, but clearly, you're showing them what you'll accept. And once they see that certain behaviors don't cost them anything, those behaviors grow, they stop thinking about how it affects you. They stop thinking about whether it's right, they just keep doing what works, and what works is what you allow. Respect isn't just earned through what you do, it's enforced by what you refuse. When you set a boundary and hold it not with anger but with firmness, people adjust, they calibrate, they learn where the edge is. But when you have no edge, when everything is forgiven by default, they treat you like there's nothing to protect. This is how patterns form, one small thing then another, one skipped apology, one lazy excuse, one disrespect that goes unchallenged. And over time, you wake up wondering how it got this bad. The answer isn't what they did, the answer is what you absorbed. Most people don't realize they're training others, but they are with every silence, every shrug, every it's fine. And when you finally react, when you finally draw the line, people act shocked, not because you're wrong, but because it's new, because they got used to a version of you that you never meant to build, but you maintained through tolerance. You don't have to fight, you just have to signal, you have to make discomfort visible, you have to stop rewarding behavior you don't want to repeat. Because people don't treat you based on what you say you deserve. They treat you based on what you accept. What you tolerate teaches others how to treat you. You think things are fine, you share a success, a plan, a small win, they smile, they nod, they say, that's great. But something is off, the eye contact is too quick, the tone too flat, they change the subject faster than usual. You feel it, a subtle tightening in the space between you. But there's no confrontation, no argument, just a shift, a temperature drop. Then later something changes, a comment, a withdrawal, a small act that makes no sense until you remember what you shared. That's how jealousy moves, quietly first. People rarely admit to envy. It doesn't fit the image they have of themselves, so they bury it, dress it in jokes, hide it in politeness. But it's there, simmering under the surface, waiting for a reason to justify itself. And when it finds one, it doesn't scream, it redirects, it avoids, it dismisses, it finds ways to bring you down without saying your name. You think jealousy will be loud, that it'll announce itself. But it doesn't, it observes, it keeps score, it stores everything. Every compliment you get, every opportunity you're offered, every time someone else admires you, and while you think the silence is safety, it's actually surveillance. The quieter it is, the deeper it runs. Most people don't recognize jealousy when it's close. They look for hostility, but jealousy hides in closeness. It imitates friendship. It mirrors support, until it doesn't. Until one day you're confused why they stopped including you, why the energy shifted, why they subtly compete when no one's keeping score. Jealousy doesn't announce itself because it doesn't want to be stopped. It wants space to move, to shape, to act. And by the time it does, the damage is subtle but permanent, not loud betrayal, just a fracture that never gets named. That's why you watch reactions more than words. You watch who celebrates you when there's nothing in it for them, who doesn't flinch when you grow, who doesn't change tone when you win. Because jealousy rarely shows its face. But it always leaves fingerprints. Jealousy is silent until it acts. You explain it perfectly, the truth is on your side, you have the proof, the logic, the structure, you speak clearly, calmly, reasonably, and still they choose the other voice. The louder one, the more famous one, the one who doesn't explain but declares, "You're confused. Why aren't they listening? Why don't the facts matter?" Because in most rooms, status beats substance. People follow hierarchy even when it's unspoken, even when it's unearned. They watch who others listen to. They respond to tone before content. They measure how others react, not how correct something is, but how accepted it is. And once someone is seen as higher status by title, by tone, by confidence, their words carry weight, even when they're empty. This isn't stupidity, it's instinct. In every group, people look for leadership cues. They assume the person who seems most certain must know something others don't. They lean toward power not because it's right, but because it feels safe. They want to be on the winning side, the admired speaker, and status signals safety. That's why facts often lose, because truth requires thinking, status doesn't. Status offers shortcuts, who's dressed better, who's more followed, who speaks without flinching, and those cues guide the room faster than any data. You've seen it in meetings, online, at dinner tables. Someone says something that's obviously wrong but says it like a leader, and people nod, not because they agree, but because agreement feels easier than disruption. Agreement maintains the ladder, and people don't want to fall. Most don't realize how much they do this. They think they value truth, but they value social safety more, and social safety is found near status, not facts. This is why some of the smartest people stay ignored, and some of the most wrong become influential, not because of what they say, but because of where they stand when they say it. People don't remember the argument. They remember who looked untouchable while making it. People care more about status than facts. You answer immediately, you show up whenever asked, you say yes before they finish the sentence. You think you're being reliable, that your speed proves value, but something feels off. They take longer to reply, they cancel more easily, they stop saying thank you, and eventually you start wondering if they ever really respected you in the first place. Because availability isn't always seen as kindness. Sometimes it reads as desperation. People register how accessible you are, not just physically, but emotionally. If your time is always open, your presence always offered, your energy always reachable, they stop associating it with weight. They stop treating it like something that has limits, and anything without limits feels disposable. It doesn't matter how useful you are, how loyal, how good your intentions are. When something is always there, people assume it always will be, and assumptions kill appreciation, not by malice, by erosion. They stop noticing the value. They start taking it for granted because they don't have to earn it. But when you step back not to punish but to protect, the dynamic shifts. When you don't reply instantly, when you don't show up unconditionally, when you say, "I'll let you know," instead of always saying yes, people notice. They pay attention, because now your time has texture, your presence has a gait. Most people never intend to disrespect consistency, but they do, because effort without scarcity becomes invisible. And scarcity doesn't mean being cold, it means being deliberate. You move with intention, you protect your bandwidth, you offer less, but each offering is real. And that contrast makes people remember you. Not because you vanished, but because you reminded them what it means to earn access. The less available you are, the more respected you become. You're in a room with someone who talks a lot about their wins, their talents, their connections. Every conversation finds its way back to them. They name drop. They reframe the topic to something they can dominate. At first, it sounds impressive, but the longer they go on, the less convincing it becomes. Because when someone truly has something, they don't need to repeat it. Bragging isn't a sign of strength, it's a cover, a signal that they're not sure you'll notice them unless they decorate themselves. And the more decoration they add, the more obvious the insecurity becomes. It's not always loud, sometimes it's subtle, a humble brag, a carefully placed anecdote, but the goal is the same: please see me as more than I fear I am. Real competence is quieter, it doesn't broadcast, it doesn't need to hijack the room. It doesn't shrink from recognition, but it doesn't demand it either. It assumes value will surface not through words but through behavior, through results, through presence. You notice this over time. The people who talk the least about their power tend to have the most, because they're not trying to sell it, they're using it. They don't need your approval to stabilize themselves, they've already done that privately. Most people who brag don't mean to be manipulative, they're just afraid they'll be overlooked, afraid their silence will be misread as weakness. So they fill the space with themselves, hoping to stay relevant, but the more they speak, the more transparent the need becomes. And that need repels the very respect they're chasing. You don't trust people because they claim greatness. You trust them because they don't have to. Those who brag the most often have the least. It starts subtly, a delay in their reply, a joke at your expense, a small request that feels a little off. They don't mean to be cruel, they're just checking, not for kindness, not for compatibility, they're checking your rules. People want to know what they can get away with, what you'll tolerate, whether you're soft, firm, reactive, indifferent. They're measuring you not to destroy you, but to see where the lines are, to figure out if they're above you, beside you, or below you. This is why the beginning matters more than the rest. The first impression isn't just about appearance, it's about posture, boundaries, tone. Someone bumps into you and waits to see how you respond. Do you flinch? Do you apologize? Do you act like it didn't happen? Whichever it is, they're learning, they're adjusting. Sometimes it's unconscious. They're not thinking I'm testing this person, but their behavior is still probing. A borrowed item returned late, a disrespect masked as humor, a sudden cold tone to see if you chase. It's not necessarily malicious. It's exploratory, like a hand pressing on a fence to see if it bends. The first time you let it slide, it becomes acceptable, not because they're evil, but because people default to what works. If pushing you slightly gave them more control, they'll push again. If being vague got no consequences, they'll be vague again. You showed them it's safe, so they stay in that mode. This is especially true in power dynamics. In work, in dating, in family, people don't walk in asking, "What are your boundaries?" They walk in trying to feel them. It's faster, more reliable, and harder to fake. You may think kindness will prevent this, that if you're warm and generous, people won't push you, but that's not how people work. Kindness without edges doesn't register as virtue, it registers as softness. Until you show firmness, your kindness isn't seen as choice, it's seen as default. So people test, and they test early, because early is when patterns set. The beginning tells them who you are when they don't owe you respect yet, when they haven't invested, when the stakes are low. If they can break your rhythm now, they know the rhythm wasn't real. And if they can't, then you've established gravity. You've become a fixed object in their mental space, not something to be bent or tried, but something they adapt to, something predictable, structured, clear. It doesn't mean you need to be cruel, just consistent. The worst thing you can do is fake strength at the beginning, then collapse under pressure later, because now you've shown them it was a performance. Now they know the rules are negotiable, and all they need is time or force. But when you stay calm under a test, hold your tone, don't chase, don't over-explain, something clicks. The test fails and they move on, not always respectfully, but they adapt. It's not about dominance, it's about definition. People don't trust what's undefined, and they don't respect what they can rewrite. Every early conversation, every early interaction is a negotiation of terms, not openly, but deeply, and the terms you accept silently become the contract they follow. People test you early to define the rules, and once they define them, they rarely renegotiate. They're not confused, they're not misinformed, they're not lacking evidence, they need the lie. That's the part people miss. You sit down with logic, you bring facts, articles, charts, personal experience, you speak clearly, you stay calm, you explain the obvious, and they nod maybe or deflect or smile politely, but nothing changes, because you weren't arguing with their mind, you were threatening their safety. Some lies aren't beliefs, they're survival mechanisms, they're shields, they're the things someone uses to hold their world together. You remove the lie and the scaffolding collapses, so they defend it not with reason but with need. This is why people double down when you corner them, why they start repeating themselves, why they act offended, because somewhere under the words is a fracture and your truth is pressing on it. You think if they just understood they'd change, but understanding isn't the issue. They've heard the truth, they've seen the signs, maybe they even agree in secret, but the lie gives them comfort, identity, belonging, or power. If someone grew up thinking their worth depends on being right, they'll cling to bad logic forever. If someone's relationship depends on believing someone isn't cheating, they'll reject every sign. If someone's job depends on ignoring corruption, they'll erase facts from their own memory. It's not stupidity, it's defense. And defense looks smart when fear is high. The more you press, the deeper they dig in, because now it's not about the idea, it's about the self. They think, if this is true, what does that make me? And the answer scares them more than the lie comforts them. You can't fix that with words, not at first, because words can't replace foundations, not unless the person is already ready, not unless the lie has already started to crack on its own. That's when you can help, when you're not pushing, but catching. Otherwise, you're just noise, even if you're right, even if you're brilliant, because the lie isn't in their ears, it's in their bones. And bones don't break from debate. They break from pressure, time, collapse. So you wait, or you walk away, or you plant seeds that grow later, but you stop expecting to win with logic. Because you're not debating a mind. You're threatening a reality. And no one gives up their reality just because you made a good point. You can't convince someone who needs to believe a lie. And the more you try, the more they need it. You think being close makes you safe, that if you're always available, always kind, always willing, people will feel grateful. They won't, they'll feel superior. Neediness isn't love, it's pressure, and pressure repels. The more you offer, the less it's worth. The more you chase, the more you shrink. The closer you reach, the further they lean back. This isn't about cruelty, it's about perception. When someone needs you less than you need them, they feel power. And when that gap grows, they lose respect, not because they're bad people, but because that's how social gravity works. Attention is a currency, and too much of it becomes inflation. Every message, every favor, every reassurance, it devalues what you're offering. You may think you're showing care, but what they see is desperation, a lack of alternatives, a fear of being alone. Distance, on the other hand, signals control, not coldness, not arrogance, just a kind of quiet confidence that says, I want you, but I don't need you. That one line defines all healthy power. People lean toward what lanes away. They respect those who move at their own pace. They admire those who can hold silence without panic, the ones who don't flinch when space grows, the ones who don't beg when plans fall through. It's not about playing games. It's about showing that your center is intact, that you're not collapsing inward the moment someone pulls away. People want to be wanted, not trapped, and neediness feels like a trap. It takes away their space, their freedom, their ability to wonder, to reach. This is why the most powerful presence is often the least available one, not because it's rare, but because it doesn't chase, it doesn't flood, it doesn't need permission to exist. You've seen it, the person who texts once and then disappears, the one who leaves while things are good, the one who doesn't explain their worth. They don't need to. Their absence speaks louder than most people's presence. That's the paradox. You don't gain value by proving it. You gain value by not needing to prove it. The more you explain, the less they listen. The more you chase, the more they flee. The more you show you need them, the more they feel they don't need you. Distance doesn't create rejection, it creates clarity. It lets people decide without pressure, and if they come back, they mean it. If they don't, they never did. Respect isn't born from closeness. It's born from boundaries. The less you need to be wanted, the more wanted you become. Because people respect distance, not neediness. He yells, she mocks, they interrupt, they posture. It looks like strength. It feels like danger, but if you look a layer deeper, you'll see it fear. Most people who lash out aren't trying to dominate. They're trying to protect, not their pride, not even their ego, something softer, something older, a scar they forgot how to cover gently. Aggression isn't random, it's a reflex, a learned response to feeling unsafe, and what makes people feel unsafe isn't always physical, it's psychological, a challenge to their identity, their control, their story about themselves. A joke they didn't expect, a tone that felt too cold, a truth that cuts too close. These things aren't threats to the body, they're threats to the illusion, and the illusion must survive. So they bark, they belittle, they shut you down, because if they stop to listen, even for a second, the crack might widen. Think about school bullies, about loud coworkers, about politicians. Underneath the volume is always a fracture, a fear of being small, a fear of being seen, not the way they want, but the way they are. Even subtle aggression, sarcasm, condescension, passive digs, these are shields. Elegant ones maybe, but shields nonetheless, tools for control. Because if they can destabilize you, they don't have to feel unstable themselves. Understanding this doesn't mean you excuse it, but it means you stop taking it personally, because it rarely is. Their reaction to you isn't about you, it's about the version of you that threatened their balance. That's why arguing back rarely works. It escalates the noise, but it doesn't touch the source. They're not debating you, they're drowning, and you're just the nearest raft to push away from. Real strength isn't reacting to aggression, it's seeing through it, not backing down but not stepping into their chaos either, just standing there, calm, like a mirror they can't crack. Sometimes this disarms them, sometimes it enrages them more, but either way you've kept your center, and that's what they can't touch. Most people aren't trying to win. They're trying not to feel small. Aggression is their mask, their armor, their way of saying, "Don't see me." And if you do, if you see past it, you realize they're not the enemy. They're just scared. Most aggression is defense. And if you treat it like war, you lose the deeper game. You're in a meeting, someone disagrees with you strongly. All eyes turn to you. You could answer right away. You could defend yourself, explain, push back, but instead you pause. You take a breath, you look around, you don't flinch. And in that silence, that gap of stillness, something strange happens. People lean in, they wait, they expect control. Because the pause signals something deeper than words ever could. Most people react fast because they're afraid of looking wrong, afraid of losing ground, afraid of silence, so they fill it with noise, with explanations, with nervous laughter. But when someone reacts slowly, the room reads it differently. It reads calm, it reads power. The brain associates urgency with fear. So when you move without urgency, you look like you're not afraid, like you've seen this before, like you're choosing your moment, like you've already won and you're deciding how much to show. And in a world addicted to speed, the one who slows down owns the pace. Think of the great negotiators, the best interrogators, the sharpest leaders. They don't rush to fill the air. They let the silence work for them. They know people reveal more when they're uncomfortable, and people get uncomfortable when you don't give them what they expect, immediate reaction. That stillness creates pressure, and pressure reveals truth. It also resets dynamics. When someone criticizes you and you don't react, it throws off their rhythm. They expect pushback, or panic, or over-explaining. When you give them neither, they lose their script, and now they're exposed, because the loudest person in the room suddenly feels like the weakest. This doesn't mean you never respond. It means you respond on your terms, not theirs, not the emotion of the moment, not the bait, but the choice, calm, measured, grounded. People mistake that for confidence, or wisdom, or power, but really it's just discipline, the ability to delay your ego long enough to see the full picture. And when people see that, they assume strength. They may not like it, but they respect it, because most don't have it. Most people are ruled by their first impulse, and they recognize instantly when someone is. So the next time you're challenged, insulted, or provoked, don't answer right away. Just wait, just breathe. Let the silence speak first. You'll be surprised how loud it is. Because in a world of fast reactions, the one who waits looks like they know something the others don't. You meet someone, they don't talk much, they don't try hard, but somehow you feel seen, you feel understood, you feel like they get you. Why? Because they're fully there. That's the secret most people miss about charisma. It's not energy, it's not charm, it's not jokes, smiles, or stories, it's presence. Charisma isn't what you give off. It's what you give to. When someone is truly present with you, it's rare. Most people only half listen. They're thinking of what to say next, or checking their phone, or waiting for their turn. You can feel it. That small gap between you and them, the one that says, "I'm not fully here." But when someone pays calm, undivided attention, it feels like gravity. Like they pulled the rest of the world out of the room and left only you. And that attention is addictive. We're wired to crave it. It makes us feel real, like we exist, like we matter, so we lean in, we trust them, we admire them, and we call that feeling charisma. But they didn't do anything special, they just weren't somewhere else. It's the calm that makes it powerful, not frantic, needy attention, not overeagerness, but a kind of effortless stillness that says, "I'm not trying to impress you, I'm interested in you," and that's rare, so it shines. People confuse charisma with extroversion, or seduction, or flair. But real charisma has nothing to do with how much you speak, and everything to do with how fully you listen. It's not about being magnetic, it's about being a mirror, a space that lets people see more of themselves because you're not crowding them with your own performance. That's why calm people often feel more charismatic than loud ones, because they don't compete, they focus. And that makes you feel interesting, and everyone wants to feel interesting. So if you want to be more charismatic, don't change your voice. Don't force smiles. Don't rehearse lines, just do one thing. Be fully there. Look at them like they matter. Listen like you don't need to speak. Breathe like you're not in a rush to escape. And suddenly, they feel something they haven't felt in a long time. Saying, charisma isn't magic. It's attention without anxiety. And in today's world, that feels like power. You're at lunch, a colleague leans in, their voice drops. They start telling you about someone else, what they did, who they like, what they said when no one else was listening. You nod, maybe even smile. There's a certain thrill to it, the feeling of being trusted, included, part of the inner circle. But something deeper is happening. Because the moment someone proves they're willing to betray someone else's privacy, they're also proving they'll betray yours. It's not personal, it's behavioral. Gossip isn't a relationship, it's a transaction. The person doing it wants something: status, control, a sense of importance, and they've learned a shortcut: share secrets. But what you have to understand is this: if they do it for you, they'll do it to you. The same voice that whispers to you today will whisper about you tomorrow. People think gossip is about content, the words, the dirt, the drama, but it's not. It's about trust, and more precisely, the violation of trust. When someone gossips, they're announcing that loyalty is flexible, that friendship is tactical, that what's said in confidence has an expiration date. And when you hear them speak about someone else behind their back, you're not just learning about that other person. You're learning about the speaker. You're seeing their rules. You're being shown the terms of their loyalty. And the most dangerous part, you forget, you think you're special, you think they like you more, that you're the exception. But you're not. The behavior doesn't change, just the target. Even worse, by listening and nodding, you're signing the contract. You're becoming part of it, because gossip doesn't spread unless someone listens. The flame needs air. The story needs an audience. And when you give it space, you become a carrier and, eventually, a casualty. Because one day, someone will pull you aside. And the story being whispered will be about you. It won't be accurate. It won't be fair. But it will sound true, because that's what gossip does best. It bends the truth just enough to be believable. It mixes facts with tone, context with suggestion. It creates shadows where there used to be light. And the worst part, you'll never be there to correct it. So the rule is simple. If someone brings you gossip, treat it as a warning, not about the person they're talking about, but about them. You're being shown the limit of their loyalty, the shape of their ethics, the way they use information for leverage. And eventually, that leverage will be used against you. Because those who gossip to you, gossip about you, not because they're evil, but because that's who they are. And no one changes that overnight. You're in a room, someone stands up and says what they're going to do. Their tone is confident, their words are strong, they make a promise, a big one, everyone nods. But inside, you wait. Because you've heard promises before. And you've learned something most people don't say out loud: words are easy, actions are rare. People want to believe in declarations. They want to trust big plans, bold ideas, grand commitments. But in the end, no one follows what you say, they follow what you do. That's the rule. Because real trust isn't built on future intention, it's built on past behavior. We don't trust someone because they sound convincing. We trust them because we've seen them follow through when it was hard, when no one noticed, when they had every excuse to stop but didn't. That's what separates leaders from talkers. Anyone can say, "I'll be there." Few people actually show up. Anyone can say, "You can count on me." But count the times they actually came through, that's what matters. This rule plays out in relationships, too. "I'll change. I'll be better. This time is different." Maybe they mean it, maybe they even believe it, but it doesn't matter. Until the behavior changes, the words are just noise. Because in human psychology, we track consistency, not declarations. We notice patterns, we recognize habits, and whether we admit it or not, we adjust our expectations based on what someone repeatedly does, not what they occasionally say. That's why someone can apologize 1,000 times and it starts to mean nothing. That's why promises get cheaper each time they're broken. That's why flashy intentions lose their shine the more they're postponed. And that's why the quiet doer, the one who doesn't say much but always delivers, becomes the most respected person in the room. Not because of what they said, but because they didn't need to. So next time you want to lead, convince, or inspire, don't promise. Show, don't declare. Act, let your history speak for you. Because people follow behavior. They always have. They always will. Words may inspire in the moment, but only actions inspire trust over time. You send another message, no reply, you double text, you justify it in your head, maybe they didn't see the first one. You wait hours, then you try again. You start wondering what you did wrong, what you could fix. You play it cool on the outside, but inside, everything's leaning forward, hoping, needing, grasping. And that's when they lose respect for you. Because in human dynamics, the moment someone senses that you need something from them more than they need something from you, the power shifts. Desperation is invisible ink that becomes legible only under pressure. It's the way your voice speeds up when you explain, the way you agree too fast, the way you justify things that shouldn't need justifying. It's the way you say yes when you should have said nothing. It's not about what you want, it's about how badly you show you want it. Because people don't respond to desire, they respond to positioning, to energy, to status. And desperation is the lowest status energy you can radiate. It makes people pull away not because they're cruel, but because something inside them interprets neediness as risk, as weakness, as imbalance. Even children do this. A kid clings and cries, the other kid stops playing, not out of meanness but discomfort. Instinct says, step back. That same instinct survives in adults. When someone presses in too hard, we recoil. And here's the paradox. The more urgently you seek someone's approval, the less they want to give it. Because it no longer feels like a gift, it feels like a tax. You might think you're being clear. You're just communicating how you feel. But what they see is imbalance. And imbalance kills attraction, kills trust, kills respect. It's not just about dating. This plays out in jobs, negotiations, friendships. The person who keeps emailing the recruiter, the seller who keeps lowering their price, the friend who keeps apologizing for things they didn't do. The pattern is the same. When people sense that you'll do anything to keep them, they realize they don't have to do anything to keep you. And that's when they pull back. The world is tuned to subtle cues. People notice when your voice changes, when your energy shrinks, when you're waiting too hard for a reply. They won't always say it, but they feel it. And that feeling changes how they see you, whether they realize it or not. That's why the most powerful thing you can do when you start to feel desperate is to stop. Stop messaging, stop over-explaining, stop asking for clarity where you already know the answer. Withdraw your energy not as a tactic, but as a truth, as a reset. Because the moment you look desperate, even if you're not, the dynamic has already shifted. Leverage isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling your own state, your own pace, your own willingness to walk away. If you can do that, people respect you, even if they disagree with you, even if they don't give you what you want. But if you can't, if you fold, chase, explain, beg, overshare, then people will start to treat you like the thing you fear, as optional. The irony, you never needed to do any of that. You just needed to remember. Needing less is noticed more. And the moment you look desperate, you lose leverage. The room goes quiet when you stand up to go. They weren't ready. They were still enjoying you, your presence, your energy, your stories. You said just enough. You gave just enough, but now you're leaving. And that's the moment they realize something most people never give them, the feeling of wanting more. It's rare and powerful. Because most people overstay, they talk too long, text too much, keep showing up even when the energy has faded, not because they're bad people, but because they're afraid to exit. But in every human interaction, there's an invisible curve. Interest rises, peaks, then slowly drops. If you leave at the peak, you become a memory. If you stay too long, you become a burden. This rule governs everything: conversations, relationships, careers, even life. Comedians know this. The best ones leave the stage with people still laughing, not yawning. Artists know this, releasing one perfect album, then disappearing. And emotionally intelligent people know this, ending a relationship before it curdles. But it's hard because staying feels safer. The attention feels good, the presence feels warm, you want to keep it going. But every second past the peak carries a cost, not just in others' perception of you, but in your own energy. The truth is we value what's scarce, and timing is a major part of that. Leave too early and you're mysterious. Leave too late and you're exhausting. The key is to know your peak and walk away on your own terms. This isn't manipulation, it's discipline. It's knowing when to stop talking, when to stop chasing, when to say, that's enough. It's how legends are made, not by giving everything, but by giving just enough to be remembered and missed. You don't want them to think, finally. You want them to think, already. When someone leaves while they're still shining, the glow lasts. Their absence echoes, their silence is respected, and their return, if it ever comes, is welcomed. But if you drain the room, if you stay until your light dims, you train people to forget, to take for granted, to move on before you do. It's not about making an exit. It's about owning the moment of exit. Because that's the part people remember, the way you ended the call, the last message you sent, the tone of your goodbye. Leave with clarity, leave with energy, leave while they still want you. And they'll value you far more in your absence than they ever did in your presence. People remember the last note in a song. Make sure yours rings. People value you more. When you leave at your peak, you walk into a room you weren't invited to. Maybe it's a conference, maybe it's a wedding, maybe it's a private lounge you're not technically allowed in. Your clothes aren't perfect, you're unsure where to stand, but you remember one thing: posture is permission, so you keep walking, not slowly, not nervously, just like someone who's supposed to be there, and no one stops you. Because people don't check your credentials, they check your confidence. It's the strangest human shortcut. People assume you belong if you behave like you do, not because they've verified it, but because they're too afraid to be wrong, too afraid to be rude, too unsure of their own judgment to challenge yours. And this trick doesn't just work in buildings, it works in life. It works in conversations, in relationships, in careers. You show up like you have every right to be there and people let you stay. Because humans follow energy before logic, and energy is read through tone, movement, gaze, stillness. The man who interrupts the CEO gets more attention than the one who waits silently. The woman who sits at the front of the room is treated differently than the one standing by the exit. And the person who speaks early, confidently, clearly, is more likely to shape the outcome even if they're wrong. Belonging isn't granted. It's claimed. But this doesn't mean pretending, it means remembering. Remembering that fear of rejection is the only thing separating most people from power. Remembering that others are just as insecure as you, and most won't question your presence if you don't question it yourself. Think of it this way. The mind likes symmetry. If someone stands tall, speaks calmly, moves with certainty, the brain fills in the blanks. They must be important. They must know something I don't. It doesn't investigate. It accepts. This is why con artists succeed, why leaders rise, why mediocrity is often mistaken for brilliance, because people see confidence and assume it comes from competence. It's not fair, but it's real. So what happens if you test this? You start raising your hand in rooms where you once stayed silent. You sit at the table instead of behind it. You ask questions like someone who deserves answers. And what you'll notice is people don't push back. They follow your lead. Because when you act like you belong, you create a social frame where questioning you would feel off, unnatural, awkward. And most people, above all, want to avoid awkwardness. They'd rather assume you're meant to be there than risk being rude. They'd rather go along with your certainty than confront your confidence. So they nod. They smile. They accept. And just like that, a room that wasn't yours becomes yours. But here's the real power. Once you internalize this, you don't just get access to rooms, you get access to yourself. You stop asking for permission to be who you are. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You realize that you were always allowed. You just had to stop acting like you were. If you act like you belong, no one questions you. You get a compliment, at first it feels good. You're brilliant, that was impressive. You're one of the best I've ever seen. You smile, you thank them, you feel seen. Then comes another, then another. Amazing, genius, unbelievable. The words stack, and slowly something shifts. The compliments start to feel less real, less earned, more like decoration than insight, more like a strategy than sincerity. And you begin to doubt the entire thing. Because when praise becomes constant, it loses its signal, and your brain, which is wired to detect patterns, starts to devalue it. This isn't just social, it's biological. When stimuli repeat too often, they fade into noise. The first compliment is noticed, the 10th is filtered out. It's not that flattery is bad, it's that humans need contrast to believe in meaning. A compliment in a sea of silence shines. A compliment in a flood of praise drowns. This is why the most persuasive people choose their praise carefully. They don't flatter often, but when they do, it lands. It's rare, specific, earned. It feels different because it is different. And the impact is powerful. People remember the boss who only complimented once because it meant something. They remember the friend who rarely praises because when they do, you know it's real. The mind registers rarity as value. So what happens when you overuse flattery? People start to question your intent. They assume you want something, that you're trying to win them, that the compliment isn't a reflection of them, but a tactic from you. Even if you mean it, it gets lost. That's why skilled communicators often withhold praise, not to be cold, but to preserve its power. Because when you do finally say, "That was well done," or "I admire that about you," the words cut through the noise. They're noticed, believed, held. Flattery only works when it doesn't feel automatic. This applies everywhere: relationships, business, leadership. The person who flatters constantly loses their voice. The person who flatters strategically becomes a reference point for truth. So what's the takeaway? Don't throw praise like confetti. Use it like a key. A key that unlocks motivation, that shows you noticed, that says, "I see you," and means it. Because in a world drowning in empty affirmation, the rarest words become the most powerful. And the quietest compliment becomes the loudest memory. Flattery only works when it's scarce. You scroll through social media and see someone doing something you claim to hate. Maybe it's a self-help influencer selling a dream. Maybe it's a shallow trend going viral. Maybe it's a business strategy that feels manipulative. You roll your eyes, you say, "I'd never do that." But deep down, something stirs, not admiration, but curiosity, because it's working. And whether you like it or not, your brain is watching. Humans are mimic machines. From childhood, we imitate to survive, copying voices, expressions, gestures. We learn by repetition. We believe by familiarity. And even in adulthood, that impulse never fades. When we see something work, we remember it, even if we claim to despise it. The loudest critic often ends up doing the very thing they mocked, just in quieter tones. You see this everywhere. The rebel becomes a brand. The outsider learns PR. The idealist discovers monetization. And slowly, the distance between "I would never" and "I guess it works" begins to shrink. It's not about hypocrisy, it's about pattern recognition. Because results speak louder than values. Most people say they care about principles, but what they really track is what works, what spreads, what survives, what gets rewarded. And over time, even the most resistant minds start to lean toward the winning formula. It starts subtly: a change in tone, a new approach, a borrowed tactic from someone you once dismissed. You tell yourself it's different, that you're doing it with integrity, and maybe you are, but the blueprint is still borrowed. People copy what works, even when they claim they're above it. This is why bad behavior repeats, why shallow content thrives, why manipulators often rise faster than honest leaders, because the strategy is visible and visibility is power. The system doesn't reward virtue, it rewards effectiveness, and effectiveness becomes contagious. But here's the twist: you can't blame people for copying. Because the brain is designed to imitate success. It's wired to scan for outcomes and reverse engineer them, and in a noisy world, what gets attention is often mistaken for what deserves it. So how do you escape the trap? You can't not fully, but you can become aware of it. You can ask yourself, am I choosing this because it aligns with my principles, or because it worked for someone else? You can notice when admiration is masked as disdain. Because what we mock is often what we fear will become. People copy what works even when they hate it, especially when they hate it, because hate keeps it in focus. And what stays in focus becomes instruction. They laugh at your jokes, they compliment your intelligence, they tell you you're different, special, not like the others. Within minutes you feel seen, understood, appreciated in a way you haven't felt in a long time. The conversation flows, the attention feels electric, it's like you've known each other forever. And that's exactly the problem. Because real connection takes time, but charm doesn't. Charm is performance. It's fluency in signals, eye contact, tone modulation, calibrated vulnerability, rehearsed warmth. It's not always fake, but it can be. And when it shows up too early in too high a dose, it's often not about you at all. It's about control. Genuine relationships begin with curiosity, not clarity, with a slow unfolding, not instant compatibility. When someone seems to get you too quickly, ask yourself, how do they know what to say? How are they mirroring so precisely? Why do they seem custom-built to make you feel safe? Because maybe they are. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern awareness. Manipulators don't build trust by force. They build it with charm, with praise, with speed. They rush intimacy before you've had a chance to question it. And in that rush, they skip one crucial step: reality. They don't know you. Not yet. But they act like they do. And that's the giveaway. Because real affection includes awkwardness, uncertainty, moments of misreading. It builds from friction, not perfection. If someone is too smooth too early, they're not relating, they're performing. And every performance has a motive. That motive isn't always dark. Sometimes it's insecurity, sometimes it's habit, sometimes it's just someone trying too hard. But when someone's charm feels preloaded, like it would have landed on anyone who walked through the door, be cautious. Because charm without history is a script. So how do you tell the difference? Watch what happens when you don't respond with equal enthusiasm. Do they stay steady, or do they pull back, get irritated, lose interest? Real connection can handle disinterest. Performance can't. Notice whether they ask questions or just tell stories. Notice whether they adapt to you or perform at you. Notice how fast they offer compliments and how fast they expect them in return. Because the most dangerous person in the room is rarely the loudest. It's the one who seems too perfect too soon. If someone is too charming too quickly, they're either selling something or hiding something. Sometimes both. You walk into a room late. A friend glances up and says, "Rough night." You nod, shrug, and take a seat. But in that moment, the narrative is already locked in. You're tired, maybe irresponsible, maybe careless, and everything you say from then on is filtered through that one line. It doesn't matter what the facts are. What matters is who speaks first and how they frame the situation. Framing isn't lying, it's choosing which part of the truth to emphasize. It's deciding where the story starts, who the victim is, who had control, who was reacting, and who was leading. And once the frame is in place, the rest of the picture rearranges itself. This happens constantly. You get into an argument, the first person to speak frames it as you overreacting. Now everything you say looks emotional, or maybe they frame it as just asking a question. Suddenly, your pushback seems unfair, like you're shutting down a conversation. The power isn't in what happened, it's in what the story says happened. You see this in politics. The same event becomes a protest or a riot depending on who describes it. You see it in relationships where setting a boundary becomes being cold and being honest becomes being cruel. The frame decides the lens. And once a frame sticks, it's hard to break. Because people don't remember events, they remember interpretations. They remember how a moment felt, not how it unfolded, and the first story they hear often becomes the default. Whoever defines the beginning defines the end. That's why skilled communicators don't just talk, they frame. They start with the version of the story that leads toward their truth. They don't wait for others to describe them. They show up with a lens already in place, one that says, here's how to see this. And the scary part, it works. Because the brain wants context, it needs a frame to understand what's happening, and it usually accepts the first one that sounds plausible, especially if it comes with calm confidence. That's why spin exists, why PR exists, why the same behavior looks noble in one person and selfish in another, depending on who tells the story first. You don't have to manipulate, but you do have to choose your frame. Because if you don't set it, someone else will, and then you'll spend all your energy defending yourself inside their version of your story. The truth isn't what happened. It's what people think happened. And people think in frames. So ask yourself, what part of the story am I emphasizing? Who looks like the main character? Who looks reactive? Who defines the why? Because the first story shapes the rest. And once a frame is chosen, meaning follows it like a shadow. You lay out your case, it's clear, rational, respectful. You dismantle every point, you show contradictions, you provide evidence. They nod, pause, then repeat the same belief. You leave frustrated, wondering why they can't see it. But here's the truth. People don't change when they hear better logic. They change when their current logic stops working. It's not about persuasion, it's about pain. People hold on to beliefs because those beliefs work for them, emotionally, socially, psychologically. A belief might be false, but if it helps someone feel secure, accepted, or powerful, they'll defend it fiercely, even if the facts are against them. You've seen this, the person in a toxic relationship who defends their partner, the employee who swears their boss isn't that bad, the friend who believes the world is out to get them. You can talk for hours, you can show them the cracks, but they won't budge. Because the belief protects them. And until that belief fails, until it causes enough loss, rejection, or discomfort, they'll keep it. This is why some of the biggest personal changes happen after breakups, bankruptcies, or betrayals. Not because someone gave a great speech, but because reality made their old belief impossible to keep. They didn't change their mind. They lost their reason not to. This is why arguing often backfires. Because when you push someone into a corner, they don't let go of their belief, they double down, not because they're evil or stupid, but because they're scared. You're not just attacking their logic, you're threatening their emotional foundation. And people protect that foundation, even at the cost of truth. So what do? You stop trying to win. You stop trying to be right. You start being present. Let them talk. Let them carry their logic to its end. Let them live with it long enough to see if it works. And when it doesn't, when life hands them a mirror, that's when they'll be open. Not because you told them so, but because the story collapsed on its own. Change doesn't happen in debate. It happens in silence after the collapse. People don't change when you win the argument. They change when they lose the illusion. And when that happens, they'll remember who listened, not who shouted. Because transformation isn't sparked by victory. It's sparked by consequence. Let life do the arguing. It always wins. You meet someone new, they smile, speak politely, answer your questions. You learn about their job, where they live, what they like to eat. They're open, friendly, honest, and strangely forgettable. Then there's someone else, they say less, they hint at more, they laugh at something but don't explain why, they look like they know something you don't, and you think about them later not because of what they said, but because of what they didn't. This is the power of mystery. Most people think honesty builds connection, and it can, to a point. But when honesty turns into oversharing, into immediate full exposure, it creates closeness without curiosity, and closeness without curiosity dies fast. Mystery, on the other hand, creates tension, space, imagination. It pulls people in. This isn't about manipulation, it's about understanding rhythm, because attention doesn't follow openness, it follows questions, and mystery creates questions. Why didn't they finish that story? What did they mean by that look? Why do they seem calm when everyone else panics? You don't have to hide, you just have to hold back a little. Let people wonder, let them come to you, let them feel like there's something beneath the surface. Because the moment everything is revealed, there's nothing left to discover. And we crave discovery more than we crave answers. This is true in relationships, in leadership, in storytelling, even in attraction. The most magnetic people are rarely the most transparent. They're the ones who reveal pieces, not wholes, who let their stories unfold slowly, like a thread you want to keep pulling. That thread is curiosity. And curiosity is addictive. This is why silence can be more powerful than words, why a pause can say more than a paragraph, why the less you explain, the more people lean in. We remember the unexplained. We forget the explained. So yes, be honest. But don't give it all away at once. Hold a little back. Not because you're hiding something, but because you're worth discovering. Imagine you walk into a room slouched, muttering, apologizing for being late. People nod politely, but don't really look at you. They assume you're unimportant, not because they know anything about you, but because you acted like someone they didn't need to care about. Now imagine you walk in calmly, make eye contact, speak clearly, and take your seat without rush or explanation. Nothing loud, nothing arrogant, just quiet certainty. People notice. They listen a little closer. They adjust their tone. Same person, different treatment. Because people mirror what you signal. If you treat yourself like an afterthought, others will too. If you constantly downplay your ideas, others will too. If you put yourself last, interrupt yourself, laugh nervously after every sentence, people will assume there's a reason to dismiss you. But when you respect your time, your words, your boundaries, people learn to do the same. You don't have to demand it. You just have to demonstrate it. This applies everywhere. In friendships, if you tolerate flakiness, you'll get more of it. In work, if you accept chaos, you'll be given the worst tasks. In dating, if you chase, apologize too often, or ignore your own standards, they won't rise to meet you. People calibrate based on your cues. They're not trying to disrespect you, they're just reacting. Your tone teaches them, your behavior tells them what's okay, your self-perception leaks into their perception. And if you want that to change, you have to change first. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, consistently. Start by saying no without guilt, speaking without shrinking, pausing instead of apologizing, walking away instead of explaining endlessly. Every small action teaches people how to treat you. You don't get what you ask for. You get what you accept. And if you want more respect, more space, more seriousness, don't beg for it. Live like it's already yours. Because people aren't watching your words. They're watching your self-regard. And they follow your lead. You're in a conversation. Someone makes a sharp comment, a joke that cuts too deep, a subtle insult wrapped in politeness, or an unnecessary correction in front of others. Your instinct is to respond immediately, to defend yourself, to restore your image, but what happens if you do? What happens if you pause? Not out of fear, but out of control. You watch their face, their posture, you see whether they lean in or back off. You notice if they smile with tension or laugh with relief. You give them space, and in that space, something always shows. The truth behind the moment. Because when you don't react, you force them to keep talking, and people reveal more when they're uncertain. They fill silence with either kindness or cruelty. They either soften or double down. That gap between action and reaction, that's where their real motives surface. This is a rule that separates amateurs from professionals in every field: negotiation, leadership, dating, even arguments between friends. It's the difference between playing defense and letting the other side show their cards. Most people fear silence, they rush to fill it. They need confirmation, reassurance, power, but if you can sit with the discomfort, even just for a moment, you gain something rare. Clarity. A delayed reaction isn't weakness. It's analysis, it's gathering data. You're not ignoring them, you're reading them. In that pause, it gives you leverage. Because if they meant harm, they'll try to mask it quickly. If they meant good, they'll try to repair. And if they're unsure, you've just taken the upper hand without saying a word. This doesn't mean staying silent forever. It means choosing when you respond, not just how. Waiting 3 seconds to answer isn't indecision, it's inspection. You're watching how the other person handles uncertainty. You're seeing what they do when their move doesn't get a reaction. And more often than not, they'll tell you everything. People's real intent isn't in their first line. It's in their second, their third, their scramble to fill your silence. So next time someone pushes you, pause. Not to freeze, but to see. Because the instant you react, you shift focus. But when you wait, you shift power. You're in a room, someone raises their voice. A boss, a parent, a partner. The volume spikes, the tone tightens, and the energy shifts. Everyone goes quiet, not because they agree, but because they're afraid. Now they nod faster. Now they don't ask questions. Now they say yes, even if they mean no. Fear just won. Fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, what if you lose this job? What if they leave you? What if you look stupid in front of them? And the moment that fear enters, people stop thinking clearly. They comply. This is how mediocre leaders control good people, how toxic partners maintain control, how systems of power keep moving even when everyone inside them knows something is wrong, not through logic, not through respect, but through fear. Because fear interrupts reasoning. It shortcuts the brain's decision-making. When fear rises, the brain doesn't want options, it wants safety. It wants the fastest route back to peace, and usually that means don't resist, just obey. This is why confident people are hard to control, not because they're immune to fear, but because they've trained themselves to pause and feel it without acting on it immediately. It's not bravery. It's delay. Because when you don't immediately obey fear, it loses power. This matters in every relationship, in parenting, leadership, education, politics. If fear is your primary tool, your authority is fake. You're not being followed, you're being tolerated. People nod now, but they'll rebel later. They'll obey when watched and sabotage when unseen. Because fear doesn't build loyalty, it builds pressure, and pressure always looks stable until it breaks. The strongest influence comes not from fear, but from calm consistency, from respect, from clarity, from boundaries. But if you need to scare people into staying, you've already lost them. Fear works fast, but it never lasts. And if someone is trying to control you through fear, the most powerful thing you can do is pause. Notice the fear. Name it. And ask, what would I choose if I wasn't afraid? Because once you see fear clearly, you stop confusing it with truth. Fear makes people obedient, but only for a while. And once they stop being afraid, they never forget who scared them. You've seen it, the overly eager coworker who praises the boss in public but rolls their eyes in private. The friend who defends someone fiercely when they're around, yet slips in sarcasm when they're not. The partner who stays but feels distant. The applause that sounds hollow, the smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Loyalty is easy to fake. It looks like presence, it looks like routine, it looks like being there. But admiration, real admiration, can't be manufactured. It leaks out in tone, in how someone talks about you when you're not in the room, in whether they light up or dim down when you speak. Admiration is involuntary, loyalty isn't. Most people will stay where it's safe, where it benefits them. They'll follow the rules, they'll say the right things, but that doesn't mean they admire the person they follow. It just means they're playing a role, and often they don't even realize it. Because in many systems, workplaces, families, social circles, people are trained to survive, not to feel. Loyalty becomes currency, and admiration becomes optional. You don't need to admire your boss to show up at 9 a.m. You don't need to admire your partner to do the dishes. You don't need to admire a friend to send birthday wishes. But here's how you know which one they feel. If you fail, do they still speak highly of you? If you succeed, do they celebrate without bitterness? If someone criticizes you, do they defend you without being asked? Loyalty will keep someone in your life. Admiration will keep them on your side. And when the two don't match, you feel it. You feel it in the silences, in the polite responses, in the compliments that sound rehearsed, in the way they agree without engagement. Loyalty without admiration is like furniture that stays in place even when the house is cold. It's there, but it's lifeless. So why does this matter? Because a lot of people confuse the two and trust the wrong signal. They see consistency and assume connection. They see support and assume respect. But those things can be faked easily, especially when someone needs something from you. That's why admiration is more rare and more valuable. You can't beg for it. You can't force it. You can only earn it by being someone they genuinely want to be around, not someone they feel they have to be around. And when you find someone who admires you, not just stays loyal, protect that, because that's where truth lives. It's not the loudest voice, it's not the best idea, it's not the title, the paycheck, or even the charisma. It's the person who makes others feel intelligent that ends up running the room. You've seen this before, a group of people debating, circling around a problem, and one person, maybe not the smartest in the group, listens, nods, asks the right question. They don't dominate, they don't correct, they highlight someone else's insight. And suddenly that person opens up. Then another. Before long, everyone's talking more freely, more confidently. Ideas are flowing, tension is gone. And who's guiding it all? Not the person with the best answer, but the one who made everyone else feel like they had won. This is invisible leadership. It's the psychology of empowerment. Because in any room, people are secretly scanning one thing. How do I look right now? Do I sound smart? Do I look competent? Will I be judged? If you remove that fear, if you make people feel competent, respected, insightful, they become more open, more collaborative, more influenced by you. Why? Because you've linked you to their intelligence. They feel smart with you in the room. They associate their clarity, their ideas, their confidence with your presence. That's controlled, quiet, subtle, powerful. People think influence is about dominance, but real influence is about association. If being around you makes others feel sharper, freer, more valuable, they'll keep you close. They'll listen to you, even when you're not speaking. This is why flattery isn't enough. It feels fake, but genuine highlighting, that's different. That's a great angle. I hadn't thought of it that way. Brilliant. What you said earlier stuck with me. These aren't just compliments, they're mirrors, and people love mirrors that make them feel tall. So what's the takeaway? If you want to lead, don't just impress. Empower. Don't just show your value. Reveal theirs. Because the loudest person might be heard, but the one who makes others feel smart. They're remembered. And they're followed. You forget a meeting, you lose your temper once, you say something off. Most people will let it go. Maybe they sigh, maybe they tease you, but they move on. Because accidents are human. They're isolated, understandable, even relatable. Everyone's made a mistake. Everyone's snapped under pressure. Everyone's misjudged a moment. People forgive that because they see themselves in it. But do it again, and it stops being an accident. Forget one meeting, you're busy. Forget 3, you're unreliable. Snap once, you're stressed. Snap often, you're a problem. Lie once, it's a mistake. Lie twice, it's who you are. This is how trust erodes, not from one big betrayal, but from repetition. The pattern is what people remember, not the individual act. The first time someone raises their voice at you, you're surprised. You might even blame the situation. But if it keeps happening, even calmly, your nervous system adjusts. It stops wondering why. It just starts expecting it. And once that expectation sets in, so does distance. This applies to more than just behavior. It applies to effort, to care, to consistency. If you show up for someone once, they smile. If you always show up, they believe you. But if you mostly show up and sometimes disappear, the pattern becomes confusion. They don't know which version of you they'll get, and uncertainty doesn't feel safe. That's what people respond to, the emotional rhythm. Not the event, the pattern. And once a pattern forms, people stop reacting to what you say. They react to the version of you that experience has taught them to expect. This is why you might feel like you're being judged unfairly, like people aren't giving you a fresh chance, like they're holding a grudge. But they're not stuck in the past, they're just protecting their future. They're reading your rhythm, and if your pattern hurt them before, they'll brace for more of the same. That's how brains work. It's not cruelty, it's self-preservation. And that's why one sincere apology doesn't undo 10 dismissals. One gift doesn't erase a pattern of neglect. One truth doesn't cure habitual lies. People forgive events, but they remember experiences. And experiences are built from patterns. So if you want to rebuild trust, don't focus on the one thing you did wrong. Focus on what you keep doing. Interrupt the rhythm. Break the expectation. Create a new pattern and then repeat it until it becomes the new memory. People don't believe words. They believe consistency. They don't forgive when you say, "I'll change." They forgive when you do and keep doing it. Because one moment may be forgotten. But patterns are permanent until you replace them. You help them, you lend the money, you pull the string, you make the call. You're generous, maybe even heroic, you expect gratitude. But what you get instead is distance. Awkward silences, short replies, fewer updates, maybe even a little sarcasm or subtle disrespect. And you're confused. Didn't you help them? Shouldn't they feel closer to you? But that's the trick. When someone owes you, especially emotionally, it creates imbalance. And imbalance makes people uncomfortable. Most people don't like feeling small, don't like feeling saved, don't like seeing themselves as the one who needed help. It's not always about pride. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's guilt, sometimes it's the quiet panic of being seen as less capable, less stable, less equal. And so they pull back. Not because you did something wrong, but because they feel wrong around you. Not because you made them feel bad, but because they don't like how they feel about themselves when you're in the room. You become a mirror they can't escape. A reminder of a moment they'd rather forget. This is especially true when the debt is vague, emotional, psychological, when it's not about numbers but about dignity, when they know they couldn't have done it without you but don't want to admit it, even to themselves. So what do? They rewrite the story, quietly. They start to think, well, I would have figured it out anyway, or they only helped because they wanted control, or they weren't that essential. And the more they tell themselves this, the more they resent you, because that version of the story requires you to be less important, less noble, less powerful. Otherwise, they'd feel too small. This is one of the hardest social truths to accept, that being too helpful can sometimes create tension instead of closeness. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the emotional debt changes the relationship. And it's not always fixable, because no one wants to feel like they're in your shadow. That's why the most effective generosity is invisible, unnamed, unguarded. The moment people feel they owe you, the clock starts ticking, not because they're bad people, but because emotional imbalance is hard to live with. If you want to keep the connection, sometimes you have to let them believe they didn't need you, that they made the move, that they had the power all along. You have to be okay with being the ghost in their story, the quiet assist, the forgettable support. Otherwise, you might win their gratitude, but lose their closeness. Because what people want, even more than help, is dignity. And when help threatens that, they push it away. Or they push you away. They show up late, they interrupt, they borrow something and don't return it. They joke at your expense just a little too often. Each time it's small, each time it could be nothing. Could be a bad day, a slip of the tongue, a harmless oversight, and so you let it go. You tell yourself not to be sensitive. You don't want to make a scene over something petty. You don't want to seem difficult or dramatic, so you stay quiet, you smile, you move on. But it happens again. And again. Until the smile you give them is no longer real. It's self-protection, it's habit, it's fear of confrontation dressed up as politeness. You're not letting it go, you're swallowing it, hoping they'll notice, hoping they'll stop, hoping that by being kind, they'll learn to respect you. But that's not how it works. Because kindness, when unguarded, attracts tests. Not from everyone, but from the ones who need to know how far they can go. They start small, a little lateness, a little teasing, just enough to see, will you push back, will you speak up, will you flinch, and if you don't, that becomes the new standard. The bar has shifted. And now, to raise it again, you'd need to make a fuss. You need to disrupt the pattern. You need to change the rules after they've already learned them. That's hard. Because by then, they believe the rules were yours, that you chose this dynamic, that your silence was permission. But it was. It was discomfort, it was patience, it was fear of making things worse. And it didn't work. Because people don't respect the line you think they should see. They respect the one you draw, clearly, early, without apology. That's the paradox of kindness. To protect it, you need sharp edges, not all the time, but when the line is crossed, when the joke lands wrong, when the voice rises, when the pattern begins. Because if you let someone test your boundary and they pass, they'll keep pushing. They're not always doing it maliciously. Some people test because they grew up around chaos, around unpredictability, around people whose moods had to be constantly monitored. For them, testing is survival. They push because they expect the world to push back. And when you do, they don't feel safe. They feel power. And they start to take. Respect is not a product of how nice you are. It's a response to how you handle the moment after someone crosses a line. You can be kind, but don't be soft on disrespect. You can be warm, but stay sharp where it counts. Otherwise, your kindness will be treated not as a gift, but as an invitation. The room is loud, voices overlap, opinions clash. Someone slams a fist on the table, someone else walks out. Everyone's heart is racing. Everyone's scrambling to protect themselves, to fix the situation, to assign blame, to escape the panic. Except one person. They don't shout, they don't shrink, they don't hurry to speak, they just sit, eyes steady, breathing slow, thinking. They don't look overwhelmed, they look calm. And suddenly, everyone else looks to them. Not because they have the title, not because they've spoken, but because calm is magnetic, especially in chaos. It draws focus, it creates contrast, it sends a signal, this person knows something we don't. Leadership isn't loud, it's centered. It's what people trust when they feel like falling apart, because when someone is calm, we assume they have control, and when we're afraid, we cling to whoever seems unafraid. This is why composure is more powerful than dominance. Anyone can yell, anyone can rush to control the room. But the person who doesn't need to, the one who can sit still, speak slowly, wait out the storm, that person commands attention without demanding it. They become the center, not because they take it, but because everyone else collapses around them. In crisis, humans are drawn to stillness. Think of the pilot during turbulence, the surgeon during complication, the soldier under fire. If they panic, everyone around them crumbles. But if they breathe, speak clearly, keep moving, they anchor the group. Not with orders, with presence. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to solve it all. You just need to not feed the panic. You need to become the emotional sailing of the room. Because chaos doesn't last. But people remember how you were during it. The world constantly throws stress, conflict, uncertainty. You don't need to be perfect in those moments. You just need to be stable, not robotic, just grounded. And that's rare. Because most people mirror the room. You get nervous, they get nervous. You lash out, they shrink. You look scared, they start scanning for exits. That's how emotion spreads, but so does calm. So when others react and you don't, you redefine the situation. You show that it's survivable, that it can be handled, that it doesn't own you. And that's leadership. Not in title. Not in words. In energy. People don't always follow the loudest person. They follow the one who makes them feel safest when things go wrong. And if you can be that anchor, the one who doesn't shake, you'll never have to ask for trust. It will be given automatically. Because when chaos comes again, and it always does, everyone will turn to you. Not for answers, but for presence. You walk into a room and say hello to almost everyone except one person. Maybe it's on purpose, maybe it's not. Maybe you didn't even mean anything by it, but the moment passes and someone sees it. They catch the small omission, and their brain begins working. Why didn't you greet him? Are you angry at her? Was that a message? Because in social environments, we don't just watch what people do, we watch what they don't do. Silence is data. Absence is a signal, a missing nod, a skipped handshake, a cold glance, all of it gets recorded. And while words can be explained, what's not said leaves more room for imagination. That's why social dynamics aren't just about your allies, they're shaped by your exclusions. When you laugh at everyone's jokes except one person's, that stands out more than the laughter. When you give everyone praise but skip someone, that's louder than the compliment. It's not just who you favor, it's who you don't. Humans are wired for tribal logic. They map alliances, they read hierarchies, and they use these omissions, these tiny cold spots, to sense who's in and who's out, who's safe, who's marked, who's in danger. And so your indifference becomes influence. Not because you said something bold, but because you didn't offer warmth, because someone expected it and didn't get it. This doesn't make you manipulative, it just makes you visible. People are always watching, always tallying, always assigning meaning to your silences, your pauses, your delays. Especially when it comes to attention. Attention is a resource, it's limited, it's valuable, so when you withdraw it or direct it away from someone, people take note. They treat your attention like currency. So if you spend it on everyone except one person, you're creating a story, even if you don't mean to. And sometimes that story works in your favor. Because influence doesn't always mean being liked. Sometimes it means being watched, being unpredictable, being hard to read. And strategic omission, whether social or verbal, makes people watch you harder. They try to decode you. Why didn't he say anything? Why did she glance at everyone else? Why was that the moment he stayed quiet? And suddenly you've got power, not because you performed, but because you withheld, because you said no subtly, indirectly, but clearly enough that it made people think. And what people think about, they remember. So when you ignore someone, it's not a neutral act, it shapes perception, of you, of them, of the room itself. That's why the best leaders and the most dangerous ones are deliberate with attention. They know that it's not just a way to connect, it's a way to frame, to elevate, to isolate, to define the boundaries of influence. Even silence is a tool. Even indifference has weight. Especially when everyone else is trying to be liked. There's a moment in every conversation when silence becomes unbearable. A few seconds in, it's just a pause, but stretch it out 5 seconds, 10, and suddenly the room starts to shift. Eyes dart, feet shuffle, someone clears their throat, and eventually someone speaks, not because they have something to say, but because they need to fill the space. And in that moment, truth escapes. Not always in full sentences, sometimes in fragments, in nervous laughter, in a correction that wasn't needed, in a justification that no one asked for. Because silence isn't neutral, it's pressure. It creates tension, and humans resolve tension with information. That's how confessions happen, not under interrogation, but under quiet. It's why experienced interviewers, detectives, negotiators, they all know the trick. Ask the question, then wait past the point of politeness. Wait past the moment the other person expects you to speak, because in that awkward space, something breaks. People reveal themselves. They try to guess what you're thinking, they rush to explain, they admit things you didn't ask, because silence gives them nothing to react to, so they begin reacting to themselves, their guilt, their fear, their guesses. This is especially true in conflict. Say someone hurts you, you don't yell, you don't accuse, you just say, "Can I ask you something?" And then you stop, no further question, just eye contact, just space. You'll be shocked at what comes out. Because in that stillness, their own conscience gets louder than your voice ever could. And the best part, you haven't revealed anything. You haven't shown your cards, you haven't made yourself vulnerable, you just waited, and they told you everything you needed. Because most people live with unspoken guilt. They know when they've crossed a line, they know what they're hiding, but they don't always realize it until they're forced to sit with it. And nothing forces reflection like silence. It's also a test. People who are comfortable with their choices, they don't need to fill the gap. They'll let the silence breathe. They're not afraid of stillness. But people who are unsure, they crumble, they speed up, they reveal too much. So silence becomes a spotlight, not just on others, but on yourself. Because how you handle it says something, too. Can you wait? Can you listen? Can you stay present without rushing to rescue the moment? If you can, you control the tempo of the room, you become the still center, and everyone else starts orbiting you. Words have power, but silence reveals character. It forces honesty. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. You've probably heard it 1,000 times, just be honest with me. People say it like a badge of honor, like they're strong enough, open enough, rational enough to handle the truth. They imagine themselves as the kind of person who values clarity over comfort. But when the truth finally arrives, raw, blunt, and unfiltered, the response usually isn't gratitude. It's silence, defensiveness, or quiet resentment that grows in the background and never quite goes away. Think about the last time you told someone exactly what they didn't want to hear. Maybe you said their work wasn't good enough. Maybe you admitted you didn't feel the same way they did. Maybe you called out a pattern they couldn't see. Did it make things better, or did everything suddenly feel colder? People ask for honesty, but they picture a soft, palatable version, something polite, something wrapped in reassurance. What they really want is validation in the shape of honesty, not honesty itself. Because real honesty stings, it reveals, it strips away ego, projection, and illusion. It doesn't care about comfort, and most people aren't prepared for that. They want truth that flatters, not truth that confronts. You see this in every part of life. In relationships, people say, "Tell me what you're really thinking." But when you do, they accuse you of being harsh or insensitive. At work, leaders claim to want radical candor, but punish anyone who speaks up. Even friends, the ones who say, "Just be real with me," often withdraw when the reality contradicts their self-image. It's not because they're bad people, it's because most of us are wired to protect our self-concept. We want to believe we're competent, kind, attractive, reasonable, and any truth that challenges that image feels like a threat, not information. So what happens? Honesty becomes strategic. You start editing what you say, not to deceive, but to survive socially. You learn to package your words. You soften your tone. You say maybe instead of no. You give half-truths because full truths have consequences. And slowly, without realizing it, most of your communication becomes negotiation between truth and safety. But there's a strange power in seeing through this. Once you realize that honesty isn't always welcome, you stop assuming it's your duty to be brutally transparent. You begin to read the room, not just what people say, but what they're actually prepared to hear. You learn when silence is kinder, when truth must wait, or when someone is asking a question they don't actually want answered. This doesn't mean you become a liar. It means you stop playing the role of noble truth-teller in a world that only wants the truth when it feels good. And when someone does value real honesty, you'll know it instantly. They won't flinch, they'll listen. They'll ask follow-up questions, not to defend themselves, but to understand. They won't punish you for your words, they'll reward you with depth. And that's how you'll recognize the rare few who actually mean it when they say, "Be honest with me." Because everyone thinks they want the truth. But most just want to feel right. Watch how people act when they think no one's watching, and you'll see one version of them. Watch how they act when the spotlight hits, and you'll see another. The second one is usually more honest. Attention doesn't just reveal character, it distills it. It amplifies the parts of people that they usually keep hidden or under control. The quiet insecurity becomes visible. The subtle arrogance turns into performance. The charm, the defensiveness, the need for validation, all of it comes out under pressure. There's a strange truth about attention. It removes the mask by intensifying it. When people know they're being seen, they try to control the narrative, but in doing so, they expose what matters most to them. What they highlight, what they hide, what they overdo, it all gives them away. Take someone who's desperate to appear confident. The moment they get attention, they speak louder, they interrupt more, they hold eye contact just a little too long, they smile too widely. It's all designed to sell an image, but in trying to prove it, they reveal the opposite, that it's not natural, that it's performance. Or consider someone who wants to appear humble. They downplay compliments, they laugh nervously, they deflect praise. But in doing so, they draw even more attention to their virtue, revealing that humility is part of their identity performance. Attention is a stress test. It forces people to manage impressions in real time, and that management exposes priorities, fears, and deep psychological needs. You see this dynamic everywhere. In social media, the curated captions, the careful angles, the overcompensation. In meetings, the person who dominates discussion not to contribute, but to be seen contributing. In dating, the one who says, "I'm not like other people," but spends the whole night trying to prove it. The more attention people get, the less they can fake. Their patterns accelerate, their tells become sharper, and if you're paying attention, you can read people faster in 5 minutes of spotlight than in 5 hours of casual conversation. But this doesn't just apply to others, it applies to you. Think about how you act when someone suddenly pays you attention. Do you become funnier, quieter? Do you try to impress or shrink? Do you become someone else or just more of who you already are? Attention doesn't lie, it doesn't create new traits. It just turns up the volume on whatever is already there, and that's what makes it dangerous or revealing. So the next time you want to know who someone really is, don't ask deep questions. Just watch them when they're being noticed. Because attention is a mirror, and only the unshakable stay the same in front of it. There's a shift that happens the moment someone senses you don't need them. It's subtle but unmistakable. You stop replying right away, you don't initiate, you're calm, composed, and focused on your own lane. Suddenly the energy tilts, they double text, they show up. They check your status, your stories, your signals, they start reaching. It's not because you became more attractive overnight. It's not that your worth increased. It's that the power dynamic inverted. You're no longer leaning in, you're leaning back. And in that space, the vacuum of your need, they feel a pull. Most people mistake attention for affection. They think pursuit equals value, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is this: people chase when something valuable doesn't seem eager to be caught. Need is loud, it leaks through tone, posture, language. You may not say it, but they feel it, that hint of waiting, hoping, adjusting. The moment they sense it, they relax, they feel control, they pace themselves. Sometimes they pull back entirely, not because they dislike you, but because they can. When you don't need someone, truly don't, it shows. Not as arrogance, not as attitude, but as ease. You're not anxious about the outcome. You don't flinch when they take time. You don't rush to fix every gap in the conversation. You're not performing, you're just there, whole already. This kind of energy is magnetic, not because it's manipulative, but because it signals strength. You're not dependent on their validation. You're not seeking permission to exist. You're complete without them, which makes them want to be part of your world, not out of pity, but curiosity, respect, challenge. People often confuse detachment with coldness, but they're not the same. Coldness shuts the door. Detachment keeps it open, but without pressure. It says, "I like you, but I don't need you. I'd enjoy your company, but I won't beg for it. I value connection, but not at the cost of self-respect." Ironically, the moment you don't try to be chosen is when others start choosing you, not because you're playing games, but because you're playing differently. You're not following their pace. You're setting your own, and people notice. This rule applies everywhere: dating, friendships, business, social life. If you seem too available, too eager, too on, people pull back. They instinctively assume they have more time, more leverage, more room to decide. But when you move like you're already full, when you walk away without bitterness, stay silent without sulking, disappear without drama, they reconsider. The psychology behind it is ancient. In every tribal or social structure, humans learned to pursue what wasn't immediately accessible. Scarcity creates desire. Value is linked to effort. We want what's slightly out of reach. And we assume anything that needs us too much must not have many other options. That's why people say they want someone genuine, yet obsess over the one who doesn't text back. It's not confusion, it's instinct. The brain interprets emotional autonomy as higher status. The person who's not trying too hard must have other things going, other people, other sources of worth. And that mystery, that quiet independence, becomes the very thing they want to understand, possess, win. So what does this mean for you? It means stop managing other people's perceptions. Let go of trying to seem easy, safe, eager. Just focus on being stable, present, unaffected. Don't perform warmth to be liked. Don't chase silence with apologies. Don't compensate for their coldness with extra heat. Let things breathe. The hardest part, you have to mean it. You can't fake detachment. If it's an act, they'll smell it. If you're just pretending not to care, they'll see the cracks. True power comes from actual sufficiency. from doing the internal work to know I don't need them to be whole. If they walk away, I'm still standing. People don't chase people who chase. They chase people who walk without waiting, who stay kind but firm, who enjoy company but prefer peace, who smile without lanning, who speak without pleasing, who connect but never cling. Because when you don't need them, they feel it. And that's when they start needing you. There's a strange paradox in how humans respond to volume. Speak louder and people brace. They resist. They prepare to defend. But lower your voice, truly lower it, and something happens. They lean in, they focus, they start listening. Not because you're whispering, but because you're signaling control. Loudness often stems from insecurity. It's a way to force attention, to demand presence. But the mind, especially in conflict or discussion, doesn't respond well to force. It responds to contrast, to tone, to subtlety. And in a world full of noise, stillness becomes the loudest signal of all. When you lower your voice in volume, in tone, in rhythm, it communicates something deeper than confidence. It communicates certainty, calmness, presence. It says, I don't need to dominate this moment, I already own it. Think about the last time someone shouted in frustration. You probably felt defensive, cornered, or annoyed, but when someone looks you in the eye and speaks with quiet steadiness, the impact is different. The silence between their words carries more weight than the noise in most conversations. It's not just what they say, it's how much stillness they allow around it. This applies in arguments, in negotiations, in leadership, in love. When emotions rise, most people escalate. They raise their voice to match the tension. But the one who lowers theirs, who slows their breath, keeps their words tight, keeps their face still, disarms the moment. They create a pocket of safety or authority or clarity. Lowering your voice also forces others to focus. They have to pay attention. They can't tune you out. They lean forward. They stop scrolling. Their nervous system detects something different, not threat, but signal. It registers depth. In primal psychology, volume often equals chaos. Animals raise their voice to signal danger, to warn, to fight. But silence, that's the tiger in the grass. That's the presence before the move. We're wired to respect silence more than shouting, to fear calm more than fury. In social situations, the same rule applies. People with real authority don't yell. They don't need to. The quieter they speak, the more people listen, because the message is just in the words, it's in the posture behind them. The unshakable, steady presence that says, I don't need to overpower this room. I influence it by existing. You can test this. Next time you feel triggered, slow down, lower your voice by 20%, remove urgency from your tone, watch how the room shifts, how people stop fidgeting, how they wait. You're not just talking, you're shaping air. But lowering your voice doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean hiding. It means removing the noise, choosing words like a scalpel, not a hammer, creating space for meaning, owning the pause, because the pause is what makes people feel your presence. Ironically, when you speak quietly, people assume you have nothing to prove. They give you the benefit of the doubt. They project depth onto your calm, not because you said more, but because you said it without shouting. In the end, people don't just hear what you say, they feel how you say it. And stillness, real, intentional stillness, speaks volumes. Speak less, speak slower, speak lower. And watch how much louder you become. Humans are emotional archivists. We remember how things made us feel far more than we remember what was actually said or done. And among the most powerful emotional markers we carry, perhaps the most universal, is laughter. The person who made you laugh, truly laugh, has a permanent key to your memory, maybe not to your heart, but definitely to your recall. This isn't about being a clown. It's not about cracking jokes or forcing smiles. It's about the rare ability to generate levity in the middle of a heavy world, to break tension, to disarm fear, to make things lighter without being shallow. That person, the one who shifts the mood of the room, becomes magnetic. We remember laughter because it's rare, not in the cheap sense there are jokes everywhere, but in the genuine, connected sense. The kind of laughter that feels like relief, like resonance, that shows someone gets it, that they see the absurdity, that they're not trying to impress you, they're just sharing air with you, being human with you. And the one who can do that consistently, subtly, holds disproportionate influence. Think about any leader, teacher, boss, or peer you admired. The odds are high they made you laugh, maybe not in a stand-up comedy way. Maybe it was dry, subtle, ironically timed, but it made you feel lighter. It made you trust them, like they had enough internal space to carry both gravity and play. That's the secret. Laughter doesn't diminish seriousness, it completes it. People who can laugh and make others laugh signal two things at once: intelligence and perspective. To see the funny side of something, especially something difficult or chaotic, means you're mentally agile. You're zoomed out enough to find shape in disorder, to create rhythm in disruption. And people crave that, not just because they want to feel good, but because it helps them make sense of their own lives. The one who makes people laugh gets remembered not just because they entertained, but because they showed something rare: timing, perspective, humility, and perhaps most importantly, permission to be imperfect, to feel ridiculous, to be alive without the constant pressure of being composed. In social groups, the person who brings laughter doesn't just become liked, they become emotionally central, the one others orbit, the memory stick of the group, the reference point. Remember when he said, remember how she made everyone laugh. When it sticks, it stays, it repeats. In relationships, laughter dissolves defenses. It replaces awkwardness with rhythm. It builds micro-trust with every shared grin. It makes the hours pass faster. And more than that, it makes the other person associate you with lightness, not superficiality but sanctuary. You become the one they turn to when things feel too heavy, not because you deny reality, but because you know how to survive it. Of course, this power can be abused. Laughter can be a shield, a distraction, a manipulative tool, but the real memory-forming laughter is never at someone's expense. It's laughter that's shared, that's mutual, that holds space for everyone involved. That's why it matters, that's why it lasts. Because life is hard, people are tired, and the one who can walk into that fog and still find something to smile at, not ignorantly, but wisely, is someone the brain doesn't forget. So no, it's not just a bonus trait. The one who makes people laugh doesn't just entertain. They imprint. Arrogance in isolation is abrasive. It offends, repels, alienates, but when paired with undeniable results, when the arrogance comes from someone who delivers, it becomes tolerated, even admired, not because people like it, but because they respect it. We live in a world where competence rewrites the rules of personality. Someone who is soft-spoken but weak is dismissed, but someone who is loud, dismissive, arrogant, and right is often followed, resented, yes, but followed, listened to, even copied. This is the strange truth of social psychology. Results neutralize personality flaws, or rather, they justify them. You've seen it in every field: the genius who treats others poorly but keeps getting promoted, the entrepreneur with a God complex yet keeps winning, the artist who insults the media but creates masterpieces, the athlete who trashes competitors but wins gold. People grumble about them, but they watch them, quote them, share their words, because we instinctively forgive arrogance when it's earned. Not respected, forgiven. There's a subtle difference. No one likes being condescended to, but if the person doing the condescending has proof, tangible, real-world, measurable results, the brain reframes it. He's not just arrogant, he knows what he's doing. She's earned the right to talk like that. It's not cocky if it's true. And that's the loophole. Now this isn't an endorsement of arrogance, it's an observation, a map of how humans operate around power. We like humility, we crave empathy, but we trust outcomes. And when those outcomes come from someone who refuses to apologize for their strength, who owns their superiority, people fall in line. Not because they want to, but because they don't have a counterexample. We all tolerate behavior we'd otherwise hate if the person in question keeps winning. That's why fake confidence is so fragile. If you act arrogant but don't produce, people turn on you instantly. The arrogance becomes unbearable, unjustified, but if you can back it up, if your track record speaks, you're allowed to walk differently, talk differently, be different. It's the unspoken contract. High value creates high tolerance. Of course, the best kind of power is the kind that doesn't need arrogance. Quiet confidence, stoic strength, understated competence, that's ideal. But we're not talking about ideals, we're talking about reality. And in reality, the brash, egotistical, infuriatingly self-centered person, if they consistently win, will always have an audience. So what's the takeaway? First, understand that results shift perception. If people don't like you but you produce, they'll reconsider, slowly, reluctantly, but they will. Arrogance becomes palatable when it's seen as deserved, when it's seen as the shadow of excellence. Second, know that you can get away with almost anything after you've proven yourself, but never before. Before success, arrogance is suicide. After success, it's tolerated, sometimes even envied. Finally, ask yourself, am I relying on arrogance to compensate for the absence of results, or are my results so strong that I don't need to signal anything? Because at the end of the day, no one cares how humble you are if you fail. And no one cares how arrogant you are if you win. There's a type of anger that has nothing to do with strength. It's not calculated, not strategic, not even honest. It's a mask stitched together from panic and shame, and the person wearing it isn't trying to dominate, they're trying to hide. Most people think of aggression as a form of power, a raised voice, a threat, a slammed door, but often it's just camouflage. The louder someone is, the more they need you not to look underneath. The angrier they are, the more afraid they've become. Insecurity doesn't always whimper. Sometimes it roars. This happens in arguments, relationships, even leadership. You'll see someone snap at a harmless question, dismiss a new idea with sarcasm, overreact to a perceived slight. But if you trace the energy backward, if you rewind the moment, you'll find the real root wasn't strength, it was fear of being seen. That's what insecurity hates the most: exposure. The insecure person is always bracing, for judgment, for failure, for comparison. They assume people are laughing at them, they assume respect is temporary, so they act like they don't need it, or worse, like they own it. But behind the dominance, they're constantly scanning for threats, not physical ones, egoic ones. A confident person doesn't need to raise their voice. They don't need to cut you off or talk over you. They don't need to one-up, correct, interrupt, or win. They know what they know. They're not afraid to be wrong. They don't treat disagreement as betrayal. But the insecure person, every conversation feels like survival. Every interaction is proof. Are they good enough? Do you see their value? If not, if there's even a flicker of doubt, they lash out. That's why the aggression feels out of place, too intense, mismatched to the moment. You didn't say anything threatening, but they reacted like you challenged their existence. That's because you did, accidentally. You brushed against the mask. And the mask has to hold. The most dangerous people in any group are the insecure ones with something to prove. They're the ones who can't handle contradiction, who see disagreement as disrespect, who react to correction with contempt, not because they're strong, but because they're fragile. This plays out everywhere. In families, the insecure parent enforces obedience, not growth. In relationships, the insecure partner accuses, controls, isolates. In companies, the insecure boss micromanages, withholds credit, punishes independence. And in all cases, the aggression is just a misfire of protection. They're not fighting you, they're fighting the fear of not mattering. The tragic part, most of them don't even know. They think they're being assertive, protective, alpha, but they're just scared. And scared people, when cornered, get loud. So when you encounter sudden aggression, especially the kind that feels disproportionate, pause. Don't respond to the mask, look for what it's hiding. You may not be able to help them, but you will understand them. And in a world full of people shouting their insecurity, the ability to stay calm becomes its own kind of power. There's a strange rule in conversation: silence adds weight. When someone rushes to respond, we assume they're reactive. When someone waits, we assume they're thinking, processing, calculating, even if they're not. A pause signals depth, whether it's real or not. We're wired to associate speed with emotion and slowness with intellect. Fast talking can sound anxious, defensive, overeager, but slow speech, especially after a pause, feels deliberate, considered. It makes people lean in. That's why the most effective speakers aren't always the ones who know the most, but the ones who speak like they know something worth hearing. This isn't about being theatrical. It's not about manipulating others with fake drama. It's about rhythm, confidence, control. Think of a courtroom, a politician, a therapist. The people who hold the most psychological power aren't the loudest. They're the ones who wait, who look at you before they speak, who don't fill the silence, they use it. It's not just what you say, it's when you say it. A pause gives the impression that your words are the product of thought, not impulse. It makes people assume intelligence because intelligence is rarely rushed. Ideas need space. Opinions need time. Even if you already know what you're going to say, the pause creates the illusion that you're weighing your response. And in most cases, that illusion is enough. People want to feel like they're talking to someone who's not triggered, not flustered, not trying to dominate. A person who pauses shows they're not in a rush to prove anything, and that's exactly what makes others pay attention. Pauses also flip the social dynamic. In a fast-paced exchange, a pause interrupts momentum. It creates a beat, a void, and humans instinctively wait to see what fills it. The person who holds the pause controls the tempo, the frame, the room. This is why some of the best negotiators speak slowly. They wait, they let the silence grow uncomfortable. Because most people hate silence, they'll rush to fill it, often revealing more than they should. But the person who waits, they watch, and they win. In casual conversation, too, a pause can change everything. Before answering a question, before making a joke, before disagreeing, the pause tells the listener, this isn't reflex, this is thought, and people want to be around thoughtful people. Even if you're not confident, especially if you're not, a pause can give you room to gather yourself. It slows the adrenaline, it prevents verbal mistakes, it protects you from saying things you'll regret, and ironically, it makes you look more confident than you feel. Over time, this becomes more than a trick, it becomes a habit, and eventually a signal. You don't just speak to fill space, you speak to say something worth the space. So next time you feel pressure to answer immediately, try this. Pause just a second or two. Look up, breathe. Then speak. You'll be surprised how much power lives in those 2 seconds of nothing. Most people don't like surprises, not in behavior, not in tone, not in pattern. The brain is a prediction machine, and once it figures you out, it relaxes. It files you away under a label: safe, harmless, boring, predictable. That's how most social relationships settle, into a quiet agreement of mutual predictability. But when you break that rhythm, when you act in ways that don't match the label, everything shifts. Being unpredictable creates tension, and tension demands attention. It forces people to reevaluate you, to slow down, to watch, not because you're threatening, but because you're not fully mapped. You've become a variable in their environment, and the brain doesn't like unclassified variables. This isn't about being chaotic, it's not about volatility, it's about deliberate deviation, choosing not to follow the social script, saying less than expected, pausing when others would rush, changing your routine, disagreeing calmly instead of nodding along. The effect is subtle but powerful. People become more careful around those they can't predict. They listen more closely. They treat you with a touch more respect, not because they fear you, but because they can't anticipate you. And in social dynamics, anticipation is power. If someone always knows what you'll do, they stop valuing it. But if they're not sure, they stay alert. Unpredictability creates an aura of potential, and potential is more powerful than presence. This is why silence often works better than words, why a well-timed exit has more impact than a long explanation, why people chase the emotionally unavailable, not because they enjoy pain, but because they can't predict the payoff. Mystery activates imagination, and imagination fills in the blanks with value if you hold your ground. That's the key. You can't be unpredictable and needy. You can't be inconsistent and apologetic. You have to own the unknown, act with calm, speak with purpose, withdraw without guilt. When people feel that you choose unpredictability, they respect it. But when it feels accidental, when you seem confused or unstable, it backfires. The most influential figures in any room are rarely the ones who speak the most. They're the ones people can't quite figure out, the ones who smile without explaining, who stay calm under tension, who sometimes say yes and sometimes vanish, not out of cruelty, but out of control. Control of time, of energy, of access. Unpredictability also breaks manipulation loops. If someone is trying to control you, but they can't predict how you'll respond, they lose leverage. You become difficult to trap, and that difficulty becomes protection. Predictable people are easy to exploit. Their reactions are known, their buttons are mapped, but unpredictable people, they require respect or distance. Either way, they stay free. So don't be afraid to surprise people, not dramatically, not destructively, but precisely, subtly. Step outside the expected behavior, say the unexpected thing, withdraw when they expect pursuit, smile when they expect anger. Make them wonder, make them watch. Because once people are watching, they're listening. And once they're listening, you don't have to raise your voice. You already have the room. There's a kind of power that doesn't raise its voice. That doesn't rush, doesn't fidget, doesn't beg for attention. It just sits, heavy, quiet, grounded, and people feel it before they understand it. That power is calm certainty. In a world of noise, of urgency, of reactive energy, the person who moves slowly, who speaks clearly and listens fully becomes magnetic. They don't flinch, they don't interrupt, they don't let emotion leak into their tone, and that stillness becomes a refuge. People don't always seek the smartest voice, or the loudest, they seek the anchored one, the one that doesn't wobble when things get tense, the one that sounds the same before and after the storm. That's who people trust. Because in high-stress environments, it's not logic that guides decisions, it's stability. And stability isn't a look, it's a rhythm, a pace, a presence. Think of someone you admire for their composure. They're not the ones who always have the right answer, but they're the ones who stay centered even when they don't. When things go wrong, they ask questions instead of assigning blame. When people panic, they observe. When everything speeds up, they slow down. Calm certainty doesn't mean knowing everything. It means knowing what matters and acting like it. That's what people feel, the confidence that you won't break under pressure, that your voice won't crack, that your emotions won't spill into theirs. You become a stabilizer in their system, and that gives you quiet influence. You see it in leadership, in family, in friendships. When someone walks into chaos with a grounded tone, others defer, not because they were told to, but because something in them relaxes. They mirror the calm, they match the tone, and now you're not just influencing people, you're regulating them. This is the basis of real presence, not how loud you are, but how still you are in the middle of motion. That's why calm people are often mistaken for wise, even when they say little. It's why they get asked for advice, trusted with responsibility, invited into decisions, not because of their content, but because of their composure. Calm is rare, certainty is rarer, and the combination almost hypnotic. It doesn't have to be natural, you can practice it. You can pause before reacting, lower your voice when others raise theirs, take your time when others rush. You'll notice something strange, people lean in, they talk slower, they feel safer, they trust you not because they understand you, but because you're under control. And that's the signal their brain is scanning for, not dominance, not genius, just this one quiet question, am I safe here? When the answer is yes, you win their attention, then their trust, then their loyalty. So when in doubt, get still, get quiet, get slow. And let the calm do the talking. It rarely comes with fangs, it comes with favors, compliments, a soft tone, a helping hand. Manipulation doesn't want to scare you, it wants you to feel safe, wanted, grateful. Because once you feel those things, you're easier to guide. The most effective manipulators don't shout, demand, or threaten. They smile, they offer support, they remember your birthday, they say all the right things and they mean none of them. Not because they're sociopaths, but because they've learned something. People trust kindness more than honesty, and they'll often trade truth for warmth. That's the opening. They give you what you crave, attention, approval, understanding, but it comes with an invisible price. A shift in obligation, a subtle pressure, a growing sense that you owe them something, that you should say yes, that you shouldn't disappoint. Because look how good they've been to you. This is the trap, manipulation that hides inside generosity. They do things for you, but it always circles back to them. They help, but it builds a debt. They praise you, but it binds you. You feel supported until you say no, then the mood shifts, the silence begins, the smiles fade, and you realize the kindness wasn't kindness, it was currency. And now you're bankrupt. People think manipulation is about control. It's not, it's about creating dependence. The more they give you praise, gifts, guidance, the harder it is to walk away, not because you're trapped, but because you feel guilty, disloyal, ungrateful. And manipulators count on that feeling. That's why the hardest people to break from are often the ones who were always there for you, the ones who only wanted the best. They use your empathy against you, they weaponize care, and suddenly you're acting from obligation instead of freedom. The giveaway isn't the kindness, it's the contingency. Watch for the shift. How do they react when you set a boundary, when you say no, when you choose something they don't benefit from? If the warmth disappears, if the tone tightens, if the support turns into shame, that's the mask slipping. Real kindness isn't controlling. It doesn't ask for repayment. It doesn't vanish when you stop complying. That's the difference. Manipulation needs you to need it. Kindness doesn't care. So trust actions, but also trust reactions. The mask isn't in what people give, it's in what they take back. Because most manipulation doesn't look like a threat. It looks like love. You bring facts, they bring stories, you bring logic, they bring tone, you bring patience, they bring persistence, and nothing moves. Not because your point isn't strong, but because their ego is stronger. Some people don't argue to understand, they argue to win. Their identity is tied to being right. So when you challenge their view, even gently, it's not a disagreement, it's an attack, and they'll fight like it's life or death. Because to them, it is. These are the conversations that leave you exhausted, not because they're heated, but because they're pointless. You explain, they distort, you clarify, they pivot, you stay calm, they get louder. And when you finally think you've made progress, they circle back to the beginning like none of it happened. It's not a debate, it's a loop, a performance, a shield. That's what being right is for them: protection from doubt, from shame, from complexity. And if you keep pushing, you're not showing them truth, you're threatening their safety. That's why it never works. You think you're having a discussion, they think they're defending a fortress. This is common in insecure people, in narcissists, in those who were punished for being wrong growing up, in those who feel small and use certainty as armor. You can't reach them with evidence, because evidence implies that truth exists outside of them. And for people like this, the only truth that matters is internal: how they feel, how they look, how much control they have. So what do? You stop trying to win. You detach, you exit the loop, you stop feeding the addiction. Not to punish them, but to protect yourself. Because if you stay in the ring, you'll either become resentful or start doubting yourself. You'll think, maybe I didn't explain it right, maybe I was unclear, but you were, they just weren't listening. Not really. Because they can't afford to. There's a deeper truth here. Some people don't want resolution, they want affirmation. And if you can't give them that, they'll escalate until you do, or until you leave. That's the only real choice. You can't out-argue an addict, but you can stop giving them their fix. Let them be right alone. Let them talk in circles to themselves. Let them have the last word in an empty room. Because peace isn't found in winning arguments. It's found in walking away from ones that were never real to begin with. It shouldn't work, but it does. A confident tone, a steady gaze, no hesitation in the voice, no qualifiers, no I think, no maybe, no as far as I know. Just a flat, calm, declarative statement, and suddenly it sounds like a fact. Even if it's completely false. Confidence overrides content. In school, you were taught to value truth. In real life, people value certainty, not because they're stupid, but because they're wired that way. The brain is a pattern-seeking machine. It likes order, it likes clarity, and confidence feels like clarity. Uncertainty, on the other hand, feels like danger. If someone tells you something with caution, even if it's true, it activates doubt, not just in their words, but in them. You start wondering, do they really know what they're talking about? Should I trust them? Are they hiding something? But if someone says something with total certainty, even if it's nonsense, your brain relaxes. It assumes competence, it assumes authority, it assumes truth. And that's the trap. This is how cult leaders recruit, how fake gurus sell, how con artists win, not by being right, by sounding like they are, by replacing evidence with certainty, by swapping nuance for confidence, by speaking in absolutes, by eliminating all signs of internal conflict. Because once they sound sure, people stop checking. This is especially true in high-stress moments. When people are confused, afraid, overwhelmed, they look for certainty, not depth, not proof, just a voice that says, this is how it is. And the bolder that voice is, the more magnetic it becomes. Even if it's wrong. That's why skilled manipulators never mumble. They don't hedge, they don't admit doubt, they perform certainty. Because they know that humans equate confidence with competence, and competence with truth. It's not rational, but it works. Meanwhile, real experts, real thinkers often sound less sure. They pause, they reflect, they qualify, they say it depends. They talk about nuance, and in doing so, they sound less authoritative, even when they're right. Because truth is messy, and confidence is clean. So here's the irony: if you lie with confidence, people believe you, but if you tell the truth with caution, they don't. That's the world. You can fight it, or you can learn how it works. Just remember, confidence convinces, but it doesn't validate. A confident liar isn't right, they're just persuasive. An unsure truth doesn't become false just because it sounds uncertain. So next time you hear someone speak with total conviction, stop. Ask, are they certain because it's true, or does it feel true because they're certain? There's a difference, and if you don't learn it, someone else will learn how to use it on you. Everyone looks good when they're around, they say the right things, they offer help, they're supportive, attentive, kind. In the moment, everything feels right. But trust doesn't live in moments, it lives in what happens between them. Not how they treat you when they're near, but how they act when they're not. Do they keep their word when no one's watching? Do they speak well of you when you're not in the room? Do they check in when there's no benefit for them? Do they stay consistent even when they're bored, tired, or tempted? Because that's where trust grows, in the gaps. People think loyalty is what someone does for you, but real loyalty is what someone won't do when you're not there. It's what they protect, what they don't touch, what they don't say. You don't need to test them, life does that on its own. There will be times when you're not available, when they could get away with lying, or with bending the truth, or with prioritizing themselves, or with letting the silence grow just long enough to create distance. And you'll feel it. That's the beauty of absence, it doesn't hide the truth, it reveals it. Distance doesn't weaken trust, it tests it. It shows you what's underneath the surface rituals, the texts, the hugs, the smiles. It shows you who they are when you're not in control. Because presence is easy to fake, but absence is hard to maintain. That's why some people disappear the moment you stop giving. That's why others change tone the second you set a boundary. And that's why the ones who stay exactly the same, even when you're gone, even when you're silent, they're the ones you keep. You don't have to guess who's real. Just watch who acts like you're still there, even when you're not. Because the true measure of trust isn't what someone says when they're near. It's what they do when you're away. Watch any group long enough and you'll notice something strange. Someone says something, it lands well, people laugh, people agree, someone nods, the moment sticks. It doesn't look important, but it is. Because something just got rewarded. And in that reward, a pattern is born. People are always searching for strategies that work, not consciously, not with a checklist, but emotionally. If a certain tone of voice wins an argument, they'll use it again. If a certain posture gets attention, they'll adopt it. If being cold makes someone chase them, they'll become ice. It doesn't matter if the result was honest, good, or even ethical. What matters is that it worked, that it created an effect, that it gave them power or status or control. Once that happens, the loop begins. It's why some people always play the victim. Because the first time they did, someone saved them. It worked. It gave them relief or affection or an excuse. And so they learned, this is how I survive. It's why some people interrupt, or lie, or flirt, or dominate, or disappear, or apologize too often, or never at all. Not because it's who they are, but because it's what once gave them something. This is why people get stuck in toxic behaviors. It's not just habit, it's memory, emotional memory. The nervous system remembers the first reward, and it craves it, even if the context is long gone, even if it's no longer needed. The pattern doesn't care. It just repeats. Sometimes it's subtle. A person always avoids conflict because the first time they spoke up, they got punished. Another person becomes loud and demanding because once, that's how they got respect. You can trace so much human behavior back to a single event, the moment something worked. And now it must be repeated. Until it fails or until it's unlearned. So if you ever wonder why someone keeps doing something that no longer fits, ask what it used to give them. You'll find the answer there. People don't just repeat what feels good. They repeat what once gave them power. Even if it's no longer true. Even if it's slowly destroying them. And if you don't examine your own loops, you'll keep reliving the same moments, looking for the same validation from people who can't give it anymore. Because the brain doesn't want growth. It wants the last place it felt in control. You walk into a room and something feels off. No one says a word, but you sense it immediately, who's in charge, who's uncertain, who's watching, who's waiting. No name tags, no introductions, just presence. That's the power of posture. It's one of the oldest social signals we have. Before language, before culture, posture told the story. Animals do it instinctively. So do we, and we're reading it constantly without thinking. Slouched shoulders say defeat. Chin up says pride. Stillness says control. Tension says fear. What's wild is, this happens before you even speak. You might be brilliant, insightful, kind, but if your body signals uncertainty, that's what people perceive, because people don't wait for content, they scan for status. And status isn't volume, it's ease. You don't have to puff your chest, you don't need to dominate. In fact, high status often looks like relaxed calm, the person who doesn't rush, who doesn't over-explain, who doesn't fidget, who takes up space without trying. That's not arrogance, that's confidence without insecurity. And people feel it immediately. You see it in meetings. The person who leans back and listens, not the one who fills the silence, is often the one others defer to. You see it in social settings. The one who doesn't overlaugh, who doesn't overshare, who doesn't fight for approval. They don't need status, and that's why they have it. It's not about being cold or fake. It's about internal regulation, the ability to stay composed under pressure, to hold your ground without showing your fear. Because that's what posture really communicates, your inner world. No words, just signals. So if you want to raise your status, stop thinking about what to say. Start with how you sit, how you stand, how you breathe when no one's looking. Because posture is the body's way of telling others, this is who I am, this is how safe I feel, this is how much I trust myself. And people believe it. Long before they ever hear a word. You're in a room, there's a table, some chairs, maybe a screen. The meeting hasn't started yet, but it already has. Because someone is talking, someone is waiting, someone is late, and someone is in control. They might not be the loudest, they might not even be the one at the head of the table, but they control the tempo, they speak slower than the rest, they pause, they make others wait, they decide when it begins and when it ends, and no one questions it. That's the real power. In any group dynamic, the person who controls time holds the advantage, because time signals status. If you wait for someone, they outrank you, socially, professionally, emotionally. If someone adjusts their pace to yours, you've taken the lead. It's not about scheduling, it's about who sets the rhythm. Watch carefully and you'll see it everywhere. The person who arrives late and still gets the room's attention, the one who speaks last and whose words decide the conclusion, the one who ignores the clock but never seems rushed. They're not disorganized, they're deliberate, they're forcing others to adapt. And every adaptation is power surrendered. In negotiation, it's the one who can stay silent the longest who usually wins, because silence makes people uncomfortable. They rush to fill it, to explain, to agree, to offer more, but the one who controls time can wait, can breathe, can let the discomfort do the work. It's not aggression, it's control. Even on a psychological level, the person who slows things down gains clarity. They're not reacting, they're observing, they see who's nervous, who's performing, who's hiding something, because when you're not rushing, you see everything. People don't realize this, they think time is neutral, that meetings are about content, that decisions are about logic, but decisions are about dynamics, and dynamics are about rhythm. Whoever sets the tempo sets the tone. If you want to see who's truly in charge, don't look at who's talking the most. Look at who makes others wait. Look at who decides when it's over. Look at who leaves first. Because time isn't just a resource, it's a statement. And those who master it, master the room. You walk into a room, you see someone you've never met, you don't know their job, you don't know their name, but you see how others turn toward them, how they lean in, how they laugh harder, how they listen more carefully when that person speaks. And suddenly, you have an opinion. Not based on facts, not based on direct interaction, but based on social echo. This is how most people form judgments. Not from experience, but from mirrors. In every group, people are scanning each other, not just directly, but indirectly. They're watching reactions, who gets interrupted, who gets eye contact, who gets ignored. These subtle signals shape perception faster than any introduction ever could. It's not fair, but it's real. People assume someone is smart if others listen to them, funny if others laugh, respected if others defer, attractive if others flirt. Status is contagious, and most of it spreads through social response. That's why influence isn't just about what you say, it's about how others behave when you say it. And people are always watching. This is why reputations rise quickly in social environments. One strong interaction, seen by the right people, creates a feedback loop. You get treated with more respect, others copy it. Soon, that respect becomes assumed, even by those who have never met you. But the opposite is true too. If someone disrespects you publicly and no one corrects it, the damage spreads. If you're dismissed, interrupted, or mocked, and others laugh along, your status quietly shrinks. People aren't evil, they're reactive. They take their cues from others. That's why strong presence isn't about dominance, it's about commanding reaction. If others respond to you with attention, warmth, or care, that's what strangers will assume you deserve. So if you want to shift how you're seen, don't just focus on yourself. Watch how people react to you and how they react to those reactions. Because perception is social, not logical, and most people will believe what the group believes, even if they don't know why. They don't see you. They see what others see when they look at you. You're in the middle of a tense conversation. Someone says something sharp, maybe even rude. All eyes turn to you, waiting for your comeback. The pressure builds. Everyone expects a fast response, but you don't speak, you don't even flinch. You just pause. The silence spreads, not awkwardly, intentionally. Measured, weighted, and suddenly the room tilts. The dynamic changes, because when you don't respond immediately, people start wondering why. They start feeling their own words. They start filling in the gap with doubt. That's the power of a pause. Most people are addicted to quick replies. They think fast answers signal confidence, intelligence, control, but the opposite is often true. When you pause before replying, you signal authority. You're not reacting, you're choosing. You're not defending, you're calculating. It shows you're not rattled, you're not rushing to prove yourself, you're not afraid of silence. And that makes people line in. The pause disrupts the pattern. In arguments, it breaks momentum. In negotiations, it creates discomfort that makes others talk more than they meant to. In interviews, it makes your words feel considered. In conflict, it gives you power without raising your voice. A pause is not indecision. It's presence. It tells people you're absorbing everything, that your words are valuable and not wasted. And in a world where everyone is racing to be heard, the person who pauses commands attention. It's also disarming. Say too much and you lose mystery. Reply too fast and you seem desperate to be understood. But when you pause, you seem confident enough to let the silence speak for you. Sometimes it's not about having the perfect response. It's about having the patience to let others hear what they just said and feel the weight of it. That's when they realize they said too much. That's when they reveal themselves. And you didn't have to say a word. It never starts with a knife in the back. It starts with a joke at your expense, with a secret they don't tell you, with a message they delay replying to, a plan they make without inviting you. It's small, easy to overlook, easy to excuse. But it's not nothing. It's a shift. And shifts accumulate. People do betray you all at once. They drift toward it, one step, then another. Each one easier because it's only slightly worse than the last. It feels like change, but it's a direction, and you feel it even before you can name it. You tell yourself it's fine. They're busy, they forgot, they didn't mean it like that. But part of you knows. This is how betrayal builds, through little allowances. Moments when your instinct whispers something's off, but you stay quiet, because confronting small betrayals feels dramatic, because you don't want to seem paranoid, because you're hoping you're wrong. But you're not. The truth is, betrayal is never sudden. It's a process of erosion, a weakening of the bond, a slow withdrawal of care, of loyalty, of honesty, and by the time it becomes obvious, it's already too late. They're gone, or worse, they're still there, pretending not to be. This is why awareness matters. Not paranoia, not suspicion, but awareness. You notice who shows up when it's inconvenient, who defends you when you're not around, who keeps your secrets safe even when there's no cost in sharing them. Because loyalty isn't loud. It's consistent. And betrayal isn't explosive. It's subtle. Most people think betrayal means a big act, cheating, stealing, backstabbing, but the truth is it starts much earlier, in patterns, in hesitations, in choices made when no one's watching. The ones who betray you aren't your enemies. They're the ones who slowly stop being your friends without ever saying it out loud. So when someone shifts away, don't ignore it. Watch the pattern, watch the excuses, watch how they act when they think you're not paying attention. Because once betrayal begins, it doesn't stop. Unless you do. You don't have to force it, you don't have to dig, you don't have to confront, accuse, or investigate. If you just wait, if you pay attention, people always reveal themselves. Not in the big moments, but in the small ones. How they talk to someone they don't need, how they react when ignored, what they do when you're not watching, whether they gloat when they win, how they treat people who can't fight back, what they say when there's nothing to gain. That's where the truth leaks out. Everyone can act kind once, everyone can be patient for a week, everyone can say the right thing in front of an audience, but eventually the mask slips, the habit cracks, the performance wears out. And the real self steps forward. It might be subtle, a joke at someone else's expense, a sharp tone in private, a refusal to apologize, an unwillingness to listen, or maybe it's the opposite, a gentle gesture when no one's watching, a quiet kindness, a strength you didn't expect, a consistency that proves something deeper. But either way, it shows. Not because people mean to reveal it, but because character is gravity, it pulls actions toward itself. People can only fake it for so long. And the reason this rule matters isn't because it helps you judge, it's because it helps you wait. You don't need to rush into trust. You don't need to decide quickly who's worth your loyalty, your energy, your time. You just need to observe. Truth always surfaces. Pretenders get tired, actors forget lines, but real character doesn't fade under pressure, it becomes clearer, more visible, more reliable. So if you're ever unsure about someone, pause. Give it time. Because eventually they'll stop telling you who they are. And they'll start showing you.